Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Cole Zwicker, joining us to talk about the Kentucky Wildcats, and then we're going to finish up our series breaking down all of the young players, rookie contract players in the NBA this season with the Sacramento Kings and the Phoenix Suns. We split these two off again because, remember, we talked about this in the last podcast. Half of their team were in, actually, really, both of these cases, over half of their team are made up of these players, so it's going to take a while to get through. In that vein, Cole just said to me, oh yeah, I was like, yeah, we'll try and get it done in an hour and a half. I have a radio hit at 11. And he's like, yeah, good luck with that, buddy. I have hopes and dreams too. So Cole is out here just ruining my hopes and dreams. How's it going, man?
It's going well. Lofty goal set on a Monday morning, so at least we're approaching the week right here.
Yeah, like maybe it's that I haven't had my coffee yet, so I'm feeling, kind of feeling like I'm getting into it. I feel like as I drink this coffee during the podcast, my speech pattern is going to pick up. I'm going to be excited. I'm going to kind of get through this a little bit quicker, but it's probably the wrong way to think about it.
Well, it's definitely an approach. We'll see how it works. I usually talk pretty fast, and I just had coffee too, so we'll see how quickly we can get through this.
Yeah, and then after this, I'm going to go and I'm going to do like a quick little jog, and there's a place that sells Stumptown cold brew, like right around where I live. And it is,
there you go.
I am excited for that, I have to tell you. This podcast is sponsored by RX Bar. We'll get into that later in the episode. Cole, the first thing we're going to start with is Kentucky. We talked about Duke's trip overseas to Canada in our most recent podcast. Obviously, there's a lot of eyes on Zion Williamson, on RJ Barrett, and on Cameron Reddish as well, who didn't play. But I feel like last weekend, we kind of gave Kentucky a bit of a short shrift. It's at least worth going back and taking a look at guys that I think I'm actually really excited about this Kentucky team. Like, they didn't win their games by as many points as Duke did, but they probably played slightly better talent first and foremost. And I'll be honest, I like the depth of that team better. I like the look of that team better.
The depth is something that stands out for me. They just have kind of different waves, like especially in the backcourt. They just have a lot of guard play. Emmanuel Quickly, Hagans, of course, Quade Greenstill. They're pretty deep on the front line as well. So they just have a lot of bodies they can throw at you. Not the high pedigree guys as Duke. Like I look at Kentucky and I only see maybe one and done guy based on talent. But overall, I do think they're going to be a competitive team. I mean, they definitely compete. They have that mental approach. You have questions about the shooting and whatnot long term. We'll see how much some of these guys can remedy that. But yeah, I do think that from a mindset and approach, they're going to compete on a nightly basis. And I kind of do like their depth.
So yeah, this is a strange year for Kentucky in that there seems to be more excitement about the team itself than the draft prospects on the team. Right? Like normally with Kentucky, we talk about it in the vein of these one and done guys and how many there are on this team. You know, the Malik Monk, De'Aaron Fox, Bam Adebayo team. And then, the Karl Towns, Devin Booker, all of those unbelievable athletes and the 39-1, like they went 38-1 that year. I still felt like until February rolled around, we were mostly talking about how unbelievable the draft prospects were. And even last year, Shea Alexander, Kevin Knox, and even Nick Richards was supposed to be a one and done guy. And, PJ Washington existed and obviously went through the pre-draft process. Hamidou Diallo had a rather large pedigree. It was still more based around, to me, the idea of them being this draft factory. But this year, I actually just really like their team. And I think it seems to have gone back to it being more about the team than about the individual talents on the team. And I don't mean that from a program perspective. I mean it from the way that they're viewed from the outside.
No, I think that's the all-encompassing great point here is that it does seem more like an actual basketball team. Again, a little bit short on the shooting department, but they got guys like Tyler Hero, who I think might end up starting for them, frankly, not soon after the season starts. I don't know how they're going to configure the backcourt. You have to assume that Keldon's going to start at the 3. They have a lot of moving parts. We kind of saw last year, Shea Alexander didn't start the season. It was Quade Green. So Calipari will play his best players eventually. I think that he will find the right mix. And that's kind of what makes this team so interesting, especially in the backcourt, because all their guards kind of bring something different to the table.
Yeah, and it's, just kind of looking through what they have coming in next year as well. I mean, they have Khalil Whitney, they have Dante Allen, and they have Tyrese Maxey. I would say Maxey is a potential one and done, but Khalil Whitney and Dante Allen probably aren't one and dones. Guys like Tyler Hero, he's not really a one and done. Emmanuel Quickley, I don't really see him as a one and done. It's interesting to me that I'm starting to wonder if Cal sees the way that the one and done tide is shifting and readjusting to just getting kids that will be there for multiple years as opposed to getting the one and dones, and the assumption that, by the time the one and done goes out, he's not going to have access to these elite kids anymore.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think there might be some credence to that. And just stylistically and just from a talent perspective, a lot of these guys, again, just don't scream one and done. Like Ashton Higgins, I really like his ability to guard on the ball. He's got good open court vision. Saw that at lower levels in AAU play. But as an NBA prospect, pretty much an average NBA athlete, I think, for the point guard position, and he's just a really reluctant shooter, kind of like an
Higgins, you're saying?
Yeah, so like kind of a reluctant shooter, like an Elfrid Payton kind of archetype. I like him defensively a lot, but I'm not sure what he is at the NBA level. So there's a lot of guys like that on this team. Like Quade Green, I don't really see as an NBA player. I just don't think he's dynamic enough offensively for his size. But in college, again, they all give Kentucky like a different element to their game. Quade more of the shooter. Then you get, Ashton Higgins is definitely the best defensive player in their backcourt as far as guards on the ball. And then Quickly, I'm not really sure what Quickly is yet, so I'm kind of interested to see what he turns into. He has the physical tools, like he has pretty good size, has the good frame. He's improved as a shooter, but he doesn't really seem to be dynamic in any one element of his game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm a little bit higher on Higgins than I think you are, just because I really love the defensive ability. I think he is a better athlete than like an average NBA point guard athlete. Just in terms of quickness, the way that he kind of uses his athleticism on the floor, just because he plays so physically. He is very skinny, but he embraces contact inside. He actually handles contact pretty well. Body control is really good, and he's just a blur, I think, in space. The jump shot is the key. He's definitely a reluctant jump shooter, and what his NBA draft stock ends up being this year is definitely going to be based on how consistent he is as a jump shooter. But if you made me pick, he'd probably be my favorite of the point guards long term. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think I would at this juncture, just based on the preseason tape. Again, Quickly just hasn't really shown a lot, and I watched him at Eurocamp, and it was kind of the same story. So I think I'm a little bit more intrigued with Quickly than I am Higgins long term, just because it feels like, at least with Quickly, the jump shot could get to a reasonable level. But right now, Higgins definitely has more stark strengths than Quickly does.
Yeah, I mean, the guy that is obviously incredibly important here is Keldon Johnson. If you made me guess, I think that Cal will start 2 point guards. I think he'll probably start the season with Emmanuel Quickley and Quade Green, and then bring Ashton Higgins off the bench with Tyler Hero. And play Keldon Johnson at the 3 and play 2 true bigs like PJ Washington and Reed Travis, or PJ Washington and Nick Richards or something like that. But with Keldon Johnson, I think he's the glue that holds it all together. I actually have him as a top 10 pick going into the 2019 draft process. Just everything about his game screams to me future, like, role-playing NBA starter. He can shoot it a little bit more than what he showed in high school, it seems like. He looks a little bit more comfortable out there. He's tough as hell. He's physical, great frame, 6'6" with a 6'9" wingspan. Uses his athleticism well, never ceasing motor, so much energy, plays really hard on defense, and he's a really good passer, even though that didn't really show in the tape in the Bahamas. Do you kind of have that same impression of Keldon Johnson entering the pre-draft cycle?
Pretty much exactly verbatim that. He was either 9 or 10 on my board entering the year. Exactly what the NBA covets in like a modern role-playing wing type, especially at the 2, where he can really use that size. I want to see more shot diversity to his game. If he can shoot off movement, I think he becomes really, really interesting. He's a really, really good athlete. Like, I wouldn't call him an elite NBA athlete, but he's more like sub-elite to maybe a step down from that. Very, very good, though. And he makes up for it, again, just with his competitive approach, which is what makes him stand out above a lot of other prospects. That dude tries on both ends of the floor. It really seems like he's engaged defensively. I don't think his lateral quickness is outrageously good, but again, when you're on the margins and you have that consistent mentality of this guy's going to really pick up guys, he's going to switch, he's going to be engaged both on and off the ball, I think he's a two-way player potentially, but it all comes down to the jump shot. Mechanically, it looks pretty good. Sometimes it seems like his control's a little bit loose. overall, though, I think it's going to come down to, can he shoot the ball off any kind of screening actions? If he's just a catch-and-shoot guy, it limits him a little bit more. But if he can bring that secondary element to the game, he does have a little bit of playmaking acumen. He can definitely get downhill in transition. So I really like him a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And then the guy who I thought really stood out in terms of doing different things among the three returnees, and I mean, I guess maybe we can include Reed Travis, but among Nick Richards, PJ Washington, and Quade Green was PJ, just because PJ, and we'll talk about Nick Richards in a minute, because Nick Richards looked like a totally different player. But like the thing with PJ Washington is he has very real skills that he needed to improve to become an NBA prospect. He needed to improve his skill level, needed to be able to shoot the basketball. He made, I think, 3 or 4 threes in the trip to the Bahamas, and his footwork looked great. He was getting his lower half up under him. He used a really clean release on the jump shot at the top. So I was a fan of what I saw of PJ Washington, to the point where he will definitely be a projected first-round pick for me entering the year.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. I could see him. It's hard to see how the depth of the class is going to play out already, but I can I see that argument, especially. I agree with the approach here as far as his skill level needing to improve. He's going to have to shoot it if he's going to play some 4 at the NBA level. We've talked about small ball 5 in the past. I still think that's probably his best vehicle, just with his low center of gravity and his strength. But I mean, if he can shoot the ball and he can dribble, and he can definitely dribble in advantage situations, he's getting lauded a lot for his passing acumen on like short rolls. I think he's pretty good. I don't think he's really like a high level decision maker, but he is capable of dribble, pass, shoot in theory. I want to say it more over a consistent sample, but I think in the Bahamas, it's reasonable just to look at it optimistically, because he did show development. We'll just kind of see if it holds up over time.
Well, he plays super hard too. He's a really good athlete. If he is the kind of guy who can switch 1 through 5 defensively, I think is up for debate. But theoretically, he's still going to give you a marginal advantage over playing a slow plotting 5 versus someone like PJ Washington, just because he's 6'7" with a 7'3" wingspan and can move in space reasonably well. I don't know that he's going to be able to guard on an island against a De'Aaron Fox or a John Wall or whoever, but I at least like the idea of him as a backup bench combo big man who can switch between the 4 and the 5, maybe knock down some jump shots, maybe be able to play physically and tough inside, continue to rebound at a high level, and just kind of be, I don't want to say an enforcer, because I feel like that kind of gives like a negative connotation in terms of like being a quote unquote like thug out there and, trying to, start shit constantly. But I think he can provide the physical presence that teams are looking for at times, just to kind of change the complexion of games.
I get the allure of him. He definitely offers a rare skill set for his size and athleticism. So if the shooting is real and he continues to show proclivity as like a passer on short rolls, or if he gets utilized that way, if he can grab and go, we saw a little bit of that in the Bahamas. Ergo, why you get the Draymond Green comparisons, which is entirely unfair to him. But yeah, I think conceptually I get the idea. Like defensively, I'm not as high on him as a lot of people. He still was getting bodied a little bit too much around the rim, in my opinion. He's good in space. I'm not sure he's great, like you noted. We'll kind of see how it is. But he did play pretty good team defense, I thought, in Bahamas, so that was a good development for him.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the Dre comparisons, and not even just to, like Draymond Green and PJ Washington, but Draymond Green to anyone. I mean, Draymond Green is one of the smartest basketball players to ever live. So that's why it's really hard for me whenever I hear those comparisons. I'm just like, you're setting up an unfair precedent, and it's not even calling other players dumb. It's just like Draymond Green is such an outlier that it's so difficult to compare him to anyone, I think.
Yeah, I mean, what makes Draymond special is the elite level decision making he has on both sides of the ball. One of the best defensive players you've ever seen. So if you want to compare PJ to, like, conceptually a guy who can grab and go, can pass, can dribble a little bit, again, can switch, I think guys like Julius Randle would be more apt for that comparison. You know what I mean? Like, there are better options to kind of convey that point than comparing him to a historically good defender in the league. Like, we're talking about the elite of the elites.
Yeah, to me, he's like more like Chuck Hayes than like one of those guys. Like, he's tough. He's probably going to play an undersized center role. You're hoping for really strong defensive acumen. Maybe he's a little bit more skilled offensively than Chuck Hayes was. But yeah, I think that's more what you're looking at with PJ, and that's not a slight. Like, Chuck Hayes played, let me pull up his page real quick here. I would bet you that Chuck Hayes played like 500 basketball games in the NBA. He played 644 games in the NBA and started 250 of them. So, like, that's a great career. That is, he played until he's 32 years old in the NBA. That's an unbelievable career for a guy like PJ Washington, I think. So I think that's more what I'm thinking with him. And to be honest, to me, I think that is worth like a late first round pick. If he can continue to add to his skill set, that's another thing, and we'll see how it goes. But I'm in on PJ Washington at this stage as like an interesting change of pace, like kind of backup 5.
I definitely get that. Really quick about EJ Montgomery. This is a guy who got a lot of buzz coming in. Where did you have him on your board, and like, what do you think of him conceptually?
Yeah, I'm gonna have him somewhere in the top, like, I'll vaguely say the top 40. He might end up in my like first round. From a skill set perspective, I totally get it. He's very fluid athletically, 6'10". I believe he has like a 7'1" or 7'2" wingspan. When he was young, he was considered like a super, super elite, like top 5, top 6 prospect in that class, if I remember correctly. Because he looked like he could shoot it with the size, and he can actually attack closeouts a little bit. But he started to float a little bit later on, like through his junior year, and then later on in his senior year seemed to rediscover like physicality inside. I want to see him put it all together in like a nice package of skills, because when I've seen the jump shot, it's been pretty inconsistent. And I've seen mixed stuff from him, being able to effectively go inside and match up with bigger players and embrace that physicality and the physical part of the game. And sometimes he doesn't add the 3-point jump shot whenever he's focusing on doing that. So he's a very talented player. He certainly has the upside of a first-round pick right now. Maybe he's a 2-year guy. But I like his game and I like his skill set. He needs to focus in on becoming a consistent shooter and just kind of rounding out his game and doing it all at once and being consistent all at once.
Yeah, he's really intriguing as far as size fluidity combination. When you watch his tape on lower levels, especially, like a lot of things he makes look really easy, and that's something I like in prospects. He really makes the skill game look easy, but I don't know how much it really translates yet. I just haven't seen enough of him. So someone who has he definitely has the pedigree coming in, maybe not high level, but pretty sub-elite pedigree. Yeah. A lot of guys were really high on him, so you see him kind of all over the board. I just don't have a great read on him yet.
Yeah, I totally would get it if someone had him in the top 20. I think that's where his true talent level is in terms of upside. I just want to see him bring it all together a little bit more. Neither of us really think Reed Travis, Quade Green, like Jamar Baker, like these guys aren't really worth talking about in pro prospects, right?
I don't think so. Reed Travis, he just doesn't have the explosiveness. Like, he's a huge body at the NCAA level, but I just don't think he's going to be good enough in the paint. His skill level's not high enough. He's just more like, to me, like an energy kind of college big who's pretty polished around the rim, but I just don't see the athleticism. And then Quade, he's just too small. And he's not good enough offensively, not good enough athlete. So I like him at the college level again. He can shoot the ball off the dribble. He can run your offense. But as far as pro prospects go, you got to be damn good to really offset that defensive liability concern with him. And I think that is ultimately going to govern where he goes. If he gets drafted, I don't think he does. But if he did come out, I think maybe somebody gives him a lower level contract. I just don't see the upside.
Yeah, I think the idea with him, I thought he was actually a pretty good defender last year for Kentucky. But he's just small. Like, he's 6 foot tall, and it's really hard to be 6 foot tall and defend in the NBA. So if you negate that positive of his game and say it's more of like a just translatable average skill, even, you're basically counting on him being. He basically has to be like a 40% 3-point shooter who distributes and keeps teams with their offense running competently. If he was a like NBA prospect after next year and like maybe like a top 45 guy, I wouldn't be totally like shocked, but I don't think it's there yet. Tyler Hero is worth speaking about. I think he's more of like a 2 or 3 and done, but I don't think he's going to last 4 years at Kentucky. Such a skilled shooter, like so skilled at using the threat of his shot to create off the dribble, much more than a shooter, I would say as well. He might be the best shooter in this class, but he is a lot more than a shooter.
Yeah, and I do think you have to start with the shooting, though. His number one skill, off movement, too. He's probably the best shooter I've seen thus far in Bahamas and Canada play. Like, he is really comfortable running off screens a little bit, getting into his shot there. He can get to a shot off the dribble pull-up, too. It's worth noting that he does look good, and I think maybe a lot of people are kind of overreacting to the sample. I did see him at Hoop Summit, and he was one of the worst players there. So just contextually, just to give you an idea of the talent scale, and this is kind of why I think you're alluding to this, he's probably a multi-year guy, 2-3 years. I agree with you. I don't think he's probably there there for 4 years. But I think he comes into the draft and he probably gets drafted in the second round just because he has pretty good positional size at 6'5", with the ability to dribble and pass a little bit. And again, the shot diversity is going to be big with him.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a first rounder at some point. I'm just going to call that shot now. Maybe not this year, like I said, but I think he's going to be a first rounder at some point. The shot making skill, the ability to create off the dribble, those are skills that translate really well to the NBA game and the NBA spacing. And they're skills that pro teams really need. We'll see how he battles this year defensively. Can he be anything on that end? But he plays hard. He has definitely that fuck you mentality. Cause if for people who don't really remember a whole lot about Tyler Hero and the process leading up to Kentucky, he was either committed to Wisconsin or was assumed to go to Wisconsin because he's from, I can't remember if he's from Milwaukee or where he's at within the state, but he is from that area, and he blew up last summer on the circuit to the point where Kentucky offered, and he ends up going to Kentucky and just kind of blowing up the idea of a Wisconsin kid staying home and going to the state school. And every time that he would go play in high school, teams would just give him their absolute hell. They would give him absolute hell every time. And they would shit talk him, and they would really try and get in his face and get physical with him. And he would just laugh at them and smile and kind of move on and go on just dominating them. So he has the right mentality for it. He has he's kind of like Grayson Allen to me, except maybe a little bit less bouncy and doesn't have, at least so far, the tripping tendencies that Grayson Allen did.
Yeah, and I think it's going to come down probably to the defense. Can he be salvageable on that end, both on the ball and as a team defender? Haven't seen enough there from him yet to really say, but he's got to be somewhat of a two-way, not necessarily a two-way player, but just be good enough. I thought Grayson Allen was actually a pretty good team defender at Duke. He was okay. He passed that modicum of reasonableness. He was pretty bad on the ball as far as that goes. But yeah, I just think that it's going to come down to being respectable on that. If you can add that package to his ability to shoot in different ways, I could maybe see him late first round. I wouldn't value him that highly, but I could see him because the NBA is always going to value shooting. Yeah.
The last guy here, Nick Richards, I was very strongly noted last year, I will say, that Nick Richards was among the most harmful players in the country, in my opinion, last year. You look at what his on-off numbers were. Kentucky was a -4 when he was on the floor, and he played with mostly starters last year. They had a -4 net rating when he was on the floor. When he was off the floor, they had a +16 net rating. And again, he was mostly playing with starting caliber players. He was really bad last year. I was very excited that I thought he played really, really, really well in the Bahamas. The growth that he showed in his game was very positive. And I am hoping that he continues to kind of regain that confidence and continue to use it well on the basketball floor, because he has interesting tools, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there just was more purpose to his game in the Bahamas overall. I thought last year, a lot of it was pretty aimless, and his team defense was pretty horrendous as far as I just didn't think he knew what he was doing on the floor at all times, and that's kind of an understatement. So hopefully he gets more confidence instilled, and we can kind of see that, build up over a larger sample. I do think he definitely has physical size, physical tool size. He's pretty coordinated around the rim. I was impressed with his finishing acumen in the Bahamas, just getting to his jump hooks and stuff. He had a size advantage for a lot of it, and that has to be factored in to some extent here. But he at least looked more confident, more assertive offensively, and defensively, he looked better than he did last year. We'll kind of see what the improvements he makes over time here.
Yeah, right now I don't really think of him as a real NBA prospect, just because for me, the standard for bigs is so high right now in the NBA that I just don't think he has that right now. But I'm intrigued at least.
Yeah, I think he's more, again, we talked about this in the past, more of a developmental big that you're going to invest time in over a couple of years. He's not going to be ready to walk on an NBA court, for example, and then play NBA caliber defense. And those guys I tend to push down in the draft now. It's just there's too many centers available in free agency, et cetera, that can be a backup 5 or whatnot. So I don't know if you want to – I definitely wouldn't want to expend a first-round pick on him and kind of develop it over time. But maybe late second round he gets drafted just based on his physical tools and athleticism as kind of a rim-running type, and we'll kind of see how it plays out.
Yeah. Well, Cole, RX Bar is a whole food protein bar. What does that mean? Their bars are made with 100% whole ingredients. They want to be transparent and upfront with their customers, which is why they label the core ingredients on the front of the package and the ingredients that make up the texture and taste on the back. Beyond being a go-to snack that checks off a number of nutritional boxes, RX bars actually taste great. They found that creating a bar from real whole food ingredients actually tastes better than anything out there. They don't need fillers, additives, chemicals, added sugar, anything like that. RX bars core ingredients do the talking. It is simply like eating 3 egg whites, 2 dates, and 6 almonds with no BS at all involved in this package. RX bars come in 11 delicious varieties, and recently there have been 3 new flavors: mango pineapple, peanut butter and berries, and chocolate hazelnut. They also recently introduced RX nut butter, which is a brand new product made with the same core ingredients as RX bar protein bars. The new nut butters include a base of nuts, egg whites, and dates, giving you 9 grams of clean protein. These are available in honey cinnamon peanut butter, and vanilla almond butter. They are great on pretzels, fruit, or straight out of the convenient package when you're on the go. RX bars are gluten-free, soy-free, dairy-free. They have no artificial colors, no artificial flavors, preservatives, or fillers. They are great for a number of occasions, like breakfast on the go, snack at the office. You can throw them in the bag for a plane ride. You can toss them in your backpack for a bike ride or hike, or they can be a great pre or post workout snack. I am a big fan of RX bars. I have a flight coming up to Australia, 16-hour flight to Melbourne. I am going to be taking multiple RX bars on this flight because I think that I am going to need something that is clean and valuable to my body whenever I'm on that flight. I have a special offer for listeners of this show, though. For 25% off your first order and with free shipping, visit rxbar.com/gametheory. That's GAMETHEORY, or enter promo code GameTheory at checkout. For a limited time, every order will receive free samples, and that free sample offer ends on June 30th. Go to rxbar.com/gametheory. Cole, let's jump in. We are going to talk about the Phoenix Suns first. Which prospect out of DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker are you more excited about, and where do you want to start? Because I'm not going to give my opinion on this because I don't want to die.
Yeah, that was going to be my first question. I was going to put you on the spot and say, long term, who's the better prospect who you envision getting to the highest level? Because I know you're probably one of the biggest DeAndre Ayton fans on the planet. So either way is good with me. I guess I would just throw this to you. Like, long term, you just got to come out and say it. Like, who do you got, Booker or Ayton? Yeah,
I mean, like you said, it's 1A and 1B. It's a great 1A and 1B. Like, it's not a problem for the Suns. It's a great circumstance to be in. It'd be really hard to bet against Devin Booker. Like, the better way to think about this is, do we think the Suns would have traded Devin Booker for the number 1 overall pick if they didn't get the number 1 overall pick?
I don't think so.
I don't think that they would have either, which is why I think you probably have to say Devin. But again, like, I'm a huge DeAndre Ayton guy, and I think DeAndre is going to be an absolute monster in every single way. So let's start with Devin, though. So I thought Devin Booker had a really just awesome season, obviously, especially for, a guy coming into his 3rd season. The big thing for me that was always strange about Devin Booker was that his 3-point percentage, I think, never really belied what his actual shooting ability was. Like, he shot 34% from 3 as a rookie, 36% as a sophomore. He got that number up to 38%. And just anecdotally, I'll look up the stats while you're talking about him, but like, anecdotally, it seemed like he took a lot more of those shots off the dribble this year as well, kind of upping the level of difficulty on them. So to actually improve his 3-point shooting percentage while taking difficult shots and kind of having that number regress up to a level that I think is more commensurate with his actual shooting ability, that's a big key in his game. And there are obviously like 95 different keys to his game. But, for me, the thing that was most interesting was to see that the jump shot had improved, at least in terms of results, to a level that I think is more accurate.
Yeah, just to contextualize that, he took 177 shots off the catch in the half court last year, 330 off the dribble. 177 is not very much. So I think that just kind of goes to your point. Like he doesn't have a lot of help on that team, or he hasn't in the past. So that's kind of an understatement. Over 30 usage last year in a situation that was kind of reliant on him to generate offense. I didn't think that he got a ton of easy looks. A lot of his offense that he created was hard. And I think that is promising to see from a younger player, to be able to carry that kind of usage with pretty damn good efficiency, at least decent efficiency for that for that role. I expect him in Igor's offense moving forward with better surrounding talent. Now they have some floor spaces around him where it's going to get easier from him over time. I think that the worst is behind Devin Booker as far as his environment, the ecosystem with the Suns. He'll improve, and I think you're going to see that boost in three-point shooting. I've always felt like kind of his three-point shooting was a little underrating his overall shooting prowess, because he can come off movement, he can shoot off the dribble. I think there's a lot to work with there. Super high release, can get a shot off over basically anybody. He can self-create in the post. That's actually his most underrated skill. That guy bullies smaller guards. Like when he gets a mismatch, he'll take you inside. So there's a lot of diversity to his offensive game. Yeah,
like he actually posted up almost once a game last year, which is just kind of an interesting little wrinkle to his game that I'm glad that he's adding. Around the basket, just we'll kind of round out his scoring ability. Was only in the 40th percentile last year. Didn't take a ton of shots, only took 165 shots around the basket last season. Still definitely extremely reliant on his jump shot. And that's in the half court as well. But I am at least intrigued by the growth that we have seen in his game in terms of the way it's rounded out with his ability to create shots, because he can now actually operate in a pick and roll and create offense in a manageable way. Like he's not James Harden out there. I think that that's what Phoenix fans are hoping for right now. Right now, he's not James Harden out there. There are some Phoenix fans that I've talked to that want to see him maybe play point guard instead of Brandon Knight to start the year, or maybe let him run as the lead ball handler with Brandon kind of off the ball early in the year, to see what they have and to see how this aspect of his game keeps growing. I would still rather just have him running off of screens and being a secondary creator who can run inside pick and rolls and allow to create. But like, I don't know that I would want the burden of trying to distribute for others on his table, despite him being a good passer. I really do think, though, that the development in his game in terms of his ability to create off the dribble has been so substantial that he is a very, very real all-star maybe next season, even though the West is going to be absolutely loaded.
Yeah, I think he's an all-star level talent, honestly. And like you noted, the progression he's made as a passer in bigger spaces, he can make the skip pass read now. I think he's really improved that element of his game. Maybe that's the most improved part of his game since he's entered the league, is his playmaking for others. Yeah. He's really using his self-gravity as a scorer to draw in defenders and make the open play, or the easy play, or whatnot, however you want to define it. And this year, again, he's going to have better spacing around him with Trevor Ariza. They brought in Mikal Bridges, of course. So that's going to help his overall ability to get to the rim, I think, in larger spaces, with DeAndre as a bigger screen setter who can do a lot more than a guy like Alex Len, for example. So there's definitely upside to him, and I think he's going to be utilized better. Last year, 12.4% of his offense came off screens. I think that's going to spike a little bit just because Igor's going to get him running off screens, but I am definitely of that camp. I've been saying this for a while, that I want to see what he can do as a lead ball handler, because I think when you put him in that role, this starts to make a lot more sense. Their team does, conceptually, just surrounding him with three different wings, like Josh Jackson, Trevor Ariza, Mikal Bridges, then you have DeAndre Ayton inside. You can kind of play 4 out, 1 in, space the floor. It becomes a lot. It's a harder sell for me with like Brandon Knight at point guard. I know they're going to start the season with him and see what they have. But yeah, I just think from long term, you kind of look at him, what kind of archetype is he going to be? What kind of player? Are we talking about like a super maybe CJ McCollum-esque player if he can get to that level of efficiency as a scorer on higher usage? Or is he going to shift over and be that James Harden level, maybe not to the same extent as Harden, but as far as role, is he going to be that primary ball handler? That's like the most fascinating underlying question to Phoenix right now.
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, he's probably going to settle in somewhere in the middle. And that's not like a slight to him. I think that if he's in the middle of that ground, he's still an all-NBA player. It's worth noting that, yeah, he only played 54 games, so this is like a relative small sample. But players who were 21 and under, who averaged 24 points, 4.5 assists, 4.5 rebounds a game, LeBron, Michael Jordan, Tracy McGrady, and Devin Booker. That's the list. Maybe it would have regressed slightly with an increased number of games, but it's startling that that's where he is an offensive creator. Like, he genuinely has the potential to be one of the 40, maybe not even 40, maybe like one of the top 25 scorers in NBA history. Like, something that's what we're talking about with Devin Booker right now.
So yeah, I mean, Devin Booker, his production at a young age is just absolutely ridiculous. So anything's kind of on the table for me as far as his scoring prowess. Like, he's high level as far as being multiple, being more from the perimeter. Again, we talked about his post game. I just want to make one final point about his overall game offensively and how it fits in that system. I don't think he has to be James Harden. I mean, in Igor's system, it's not like they're not going to run 1-5 pick and roll every single time. They kind of just need him to be that guy to the offense goes to, late in the shot clock when they need a basket, and he's easily qualified to be that guy. So I think that he can initiate their offense and kind of run off screens in Igor's system. So I think that is conceptually what they're going to do with him. And hopefully they're going to have better talent around him. So we'll kind of see if he can raise that efficiency this year. I think that's definitely on the table because he's going to get better looks. He's going to have guys who create more gravity, self-creators off the ball. Like Ayton in the post is going to draw extra help defenders. That's only going to benefit Devin Booker. Yeah,
and I think it's worth noting as well, too, that maybe the idea right now is to have him play point guard, but this is a team that has max cap space this summer, or right around it, at 35%. They have $68 million guaranteed, and none of their free agents really have high cap holds right now. They do have to obviously exercise the Marquese deal. They have to think about what they're going to do with Dragan Bender, as we'll talk about later. So they have some decisions coming up at least, but they're going to have close to max cap space. They're going to be able to go out and address the point guard position either via the draft or via free agency. So they're in a really good spot to address that position. It's just that, like you said, it's probably more important schematically what they do.
Yeah, and I think the backcourt partner for Devin long-term is going to be really fascinating. You don't need a guy who has to have the ball all the time. You don't need this high-usage point guard. You just need someone who can initiate the offense, but most importantly, can play off the ball, spot up, shoot, and then plays defense. I think that's the key. So someone with Dylan Wright next offseason would make a lot of sense. That kind of player playing next to Devin Booker, that's who you want to pair him with because you really have to look to his weaknesses to surround him. So a guy who can play defense and a guy who can really shoot the ball off the catch.
Yeah, and I would also want someone that's a little bit bigger because I like the idea of Phoenix being able to play like a very switchable 1 through 5, everyone over 6'5" defense. That at least has value to me, just given the pieces they've assembled already. I mean, they have DeAndre Ayton, who is just a total freak out in space defensively. They have Mikal Bridges, who should figure to be very switchable defensively. They have the pieces here long term to employ a very interesting defensive scheme, and I would want to continue doing that.
100%. I think that's absolutely right. They just have a lot more of a modern team now, just looking at them and how they make sense. More wings who can shoot the ball. I think they got criticized a little bit for the Ariza signing. I didn't understand that. It's $15 million for 1 year. He's a guy who can play that combo. I thought so too. I mean, what I like most about it, there's not a lot of bad one-year deals. What makes them bad is when they take something off the table for your stars. They don't put them in position to succeed. And I think Trevor Ariza just makes a lot of sense on this roster. I mean, just spreading the floor, being able to get that bigger kind of 4 guy who can, be switchable, but also have enough girth to really guard, because Josh Jackson doesn't have that yet. Mikal Bridges doesn't have that in this frame. So I like things that put young players in positions to succeed, and I think that Trevor Ariza's signing accomplishes that.
Yeah, and worst case scenario, it doesn't work out and they trade him.
Sure.
They essentially paid $10 million for a developmental trade asset.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, some talking about potentially buying him out, I would be very, very surprised if they do that. Again, they also signed him.
They're not going to have to.
Exactly right. They can trade him. At worst case scenario, they trade him if it doesn't work out. And best case scenario, he provides veteran leadership in that locker room. That's another thing we haven't discussed is there hasn't been a lot of those guys in Phoenix's locker room over time. So getting someone like a Ariza that has that established pedigree who actually plays minutes. That's another thing about veteran leadership is you can only have so much say when you're like a fringe rotation player, right? But when you're a starting caliber player and you've done it at the highest levels like Trevor has, that's going to instill some confidence from their younger players into him and kind of get them to buy into the game and the system.
Yeah, and people around the NBA just generally really like Trevor. That he is known as a person to have that can help your locker room, can help your culture. So with Devin, you mentioned the defensive side of the ball. I am concerned about the defensive side. He did show improvement, but I would say that we can just generally say he's probably not going to be anything as an average defender at some point.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of like how tolerable can he be? What level can he get to where it's respectable? Like the two issues, I don't even say issues, maybe they're definitely an issue, but the two areas that Devin can improve the most are, again, the playmaking for others, which he's shown on offense, he's shown progression, and then defensively. I think if he does one of those two things, if he improves his defense to a respectable level, he becomes kind of a pseudo two-way player, not like impactful. I don't think he's ever be impactful defensively. He doesn't have like the physical size or the length to really be, or the motor to be like a high level.
I was going to say, I think that's the big key. He just from what we've seen in his 3 years, he just doesn't like to defend.
Yeah, and I also think you can attribute some of that potentially to role, right? I mean, the guy had over 30 uses last year. He's doing everything offensively. It's hard for those guys to be two-way players. Like, it's not like James Harden is a two-way player for the most part. So he's got to get to a level, a modicum of decent ability where he's not a total liability. And I don't know if he's going to be able to do that. I have my most reservations about his defense long-term pretty clearly. But if he can get to the point where he's reasonably poor, for example, then I think that opens up a lot for the Suns just because you can't really attack them. This is something we've talked about in podcasts with the Lakers and the Jazz. When you can play bigger players, and let's say they conceptually get like a Daylon Wright size point guard, and there's just nowhere to really attack defensively if Devin's going to put up enough of a fight at his size, that just gives them a lot of avenues to switch more and then not have a head-hunting liability.
Yeah, no question. Let's move on and talk about DeAndre. We've talked about DeAndre on this podcast for like 5 hours. If you want to learn what we think about DeAndre, you can go back and listen to probably 17 other podcasts that we have done. They mostly have DeAndre in the title. I will just kind of use this time then to ask you what you think of the fit of DeAndre Ayton in Phoenix.
Yeah, conceptually I really like it offensively as far as he finally gives Phoenix like a finishing prospect in the paint, like for big, like they just didn't have that level of guy with touch around them, a guy that can really finish plays and
for
unleashes kind of this four-out,
for many years
dynamic. Yes, for many years. They just haven't, like Alex Len didn't cut it, Tyson Chandler, they got him on the wrong side of his age. So they haven't had a player like this for a while, as far as, again, a high-level athlete at the 5 who can conceptually switch. Defensively, I think is going to be pretty good there. We didn't see a lot of it in Summer League, but you'll see that more at the NBA level. And then a guy who can really provide some offensive value as far as finishing plays. And that's just something they really needed on this team. So from an offensive standpoint, especially with the wing shooters they got around him, that was one thing, is like you have to have spacing around Ayton. You can't run out 2 non-shooting wings where they can just double him in the post. You have to be able to make them pay because he can pass over the top of double teams. He's shown that ability. Summer League showed that ability in college. So I like the fit offensively. Defensively, it's a little more interesting. I mean, like you said, I think the idea of switching a lot, this roster's kind of built for that. But as far as does he have the infrastructure to really ease him into NBA defense, like a high-level team defender around him? No. I mean, that's Mikal Bridges, Trevor Ariza, they're pretty good there. But overall, that roster is going to be still, I think, poor defensively, and it's going to take time for him to really learn the subtleties of NBA defense, of course.
So, yeah, I'm much higher on the defense than you are, as we've talked about many times. I think he is a genuinely good perimeter defender and someone who struggled a little bit whenever he has to rotate inside. He doesn't contest as many shots as he should. That's going to be something that the team needs to work on throughout the course of the next few years. What I will say is that I am bullish on the way this roster is constructed because, as you basically alluded to, the two things really work in conjunction with each other. DeAndre is a guy who's going to be able to post up on the block and genuinely actually create a situation where teams have to defend him there because he's just a physical outlier in terms of being able to establish position. That matters. He is going to be able to score on the block. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a situation where defenses have to collapse in on him, but it's also going to create a situation where you can't leave shooters because guys like Mikal Bridges, like Trevor Ariza, like Devin Booker are around. So if a team makes any sort of mistake helping down from Devin Booker's defender or Trevor's defender or Mikal's defender or someone like that, you're probably giving up 3 points or you're giving up a quick 2 points to DeAndre. It really is going to work very well and very harmoniously, I think, in the way that both their perimeter offense and their interior offense is going to work together.
I'm most curious to see how they utilize Ayton offensively. In Summer League, he kind of a rudimentary role, like we talked about on the Summer podcast, a lot of pick and diving to the rim. They use him a lot as a lob threat. I think you're going to see that carry over. I'm curious if how much diversity, how much versatility they allow him to do, like pick and pops for mid-range shots. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to shoot the NBA three above the break right from the off. I think that's going to be more of a progressive skill that he'll develop over time. But I'm very curious to see, again, how they utilize him. More of a motion scheme. And I think they're going to leverage his screen setting ability. He's got to improve there as far as his physicality, but he definitely has the frame to be an imposing screen setter for guys running off screens like Booker or Mikal Bridges, for example. So that's number one for me, is just we know kind of what his skill set is right now and how he needs to develop in certain areas. But I'm very curious to see how much leeway does he get in Phoenix's offense, because I don't know if he's going to be given the kind of usage potentially that a lot of people think he will be from the off. So I'm just very curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's move on. I think the next guy we have to talk about is probably Josh Jackson, right?
Yeah, I have Josh Jackson and Mikal Bridges pretty close here. But yeah, let's talk about Josh.
So I don't really have them that close. And the reason that I don't is because I think Josh had an unbelievable, last 3 months to end the year. I thought he was very, very good.
I thought he was pretty solid. I mean, definitely it was a huge divergence from his beginning to his rookie year, which is pretty brutal. All the negatives with him with the shooting. But not only that, I thought with the space defense, even the one-on-one defense beginning of the year, he really struggled. Guys like Tyreek were getting around him pretty much at will. So I just didn't like a lot of what I saw in the beginning of the season. But like you said, I think that you did see some definite progression. I'm not sure how much of it was bad player a good player on a bad team as far as production goes or something like that. It's hard to evaluate anybody in Phoenix's system last year just because they just didn't have the requisite talent. So I am more optimistic, of course, on Josh for the latter half of the season, even though he kind of poured some cold water on that with his play in Summer League. Yeah,
he was really bad at Summer League, but I kind of don't really care that much. I mean, in his last 37 games last year, so from January 7th onward, he averaged 17.4 points, 6 rebounds, and 2 assists a game. 43.5% from the field. The three-point shooting still wasn't there, 27%. But he looked a lot better defensively after that time, and I thought that he showed genuine growth within his game and figured out the game, the NBA game, basically. He figured out what exactly he has to do to be effective and how he can utilize his unique athletic gifts on the NBA floor. So overall, I would say I was bullish on his last, half of the rookie season. I thought he was pretty good, like genuinely, actually good.
Yeah, I side more. I think that's the player we thought we were getting more in the draft. I'm not sure of the goodness quite yet, but he looked at least like some of it was going to translate. I thought he got comfortable as a finisher around the rim, started relying more on his touch, and didn't see as many bad pull-up shots in the mid-range. He just doesn't have a pull-up jumper, and he takes a lot of bad pull-ups. You saw that even in Summer League, too, so he's got to cut that out of his system. But I do think that Summer League play, I tend to side with you here as far as it's obviously not a rule he's going to play on the main team. He's not going to have that kind of usage. I just would like to see his approach be a little bit more playmaking, because that's what made him so interesting to me as a prospect. Is he could, in theory, if he ever got the shot right, he could dribble, pass, and shoot, kind of be that playmaking wing who could also defend. We didn't see enough of passing, I think, enough of the willingness to even pass, and that's something you have to start with in passing analysis, is how much is this guy actually willing to move the ball. And I thought a lot of times his rookie year, and especially in Summer League, of course, recently, we just didn't see that inclination from him. It's more like, I'm going to score, and that's never really been his game, as far as he's not going to go out there and average 23, 24 a game. I just don't think he has the repertoire to do that. It's going to come down to, does this guy make the winning plays, the little plays that contribute to winning on both sides of the floor?
Yeah, I agree with that. The interesting idea for me is how he fits in with Igor Kokoshkov's offense, because Igor does prioritize floor spacing, but he also prioritizes wing playmaking. He really kind of lets his wings run pick and rolls and attack the basket and do a lot of actual things that could help out a guy like Josh Jackson on the floor. And, the defense I thought wasn't as good as what we were hoping for last year. We can wholly admit that it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be by us, even as draft analysts. He was actually a very good defender in college and was kind of middling on that in the NBA to bad, especially early on in his rookie year. So I am intrigued by the fit. I think it could go either way. But I am intrigued by the fit and intrigued by the idea of Igor potentially unlocking some things in his game.
Yeah, I think we got to give Igor a lot of credit here, like he deserves as far as optimizing his player. So I definitely want to see what Josh looks like under that infrastructure. But when you start really going through priority skills again for wings, I think shooting off movement is the number one thing for me. And that's just not something that Josh has ever been adept at. I mean, he struggles on catch and shoot threes, like when his feet are set.
Can I actually bring something up, though? I think he's actually a better shooter off of movement than he is just standstill, because it allows him to get into rhythm a little bit better.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never, I mean, I guess he does have flashes of that where he does come in off the hop and you see a little bit more rhythm to his game. I'm still not really sold on that, especially from three. Like maybe he can shoot like a pin down in the mid range or something, but
I'm not saying he's a good shooter. He's not. But like, I'm just saying, like, you know, if there's a world where he becomes something that's useful as a shooter, it's probably off of movement more than it is from him standing in the corner and waiting for a three.
Interesting. Yeah, that'll be something fascinating to monitor. But that's something that Igor is going to rely on with his wings, is getting those guys on the move off screens. Very curious to see how Josh kind of plays in that role, because he's a good advantage scorer when he can get downhill. So if you run him off a screen and then like he can curl to the rim and he has like a lane to the rim, I think that's where he's best. He has to improve his finishing. 19th percentile last year on 261 attempts at the rim. That's just not going to get it done when you're below 50% and you're the kind of athlete that Josh is. You got out of there. I mean, that's something that I think I noticed in his game. Like he got a little bit more comfortable as the season progressed. I'm not sure if that's backed up in the stats, but he's got to figure out how to use his touch shots, because he has pretty good touch on the move. He's just got to get that game down as far as finishing around the basket too, because if he's not going to score on the rim efficiently and he's not going to shoot the ball off the catch or off movement, I'm not sure. He's just a little bit more limited. This is kind of what you were getting at in that scheme, is where is his optimal role in that offense? Like he can initiate because he does have passing and dribbling ability, but he's not a pull-up threat, so he's not going to have that self-gravity in those situations. But I do feel like he's a guy who they can throw the ball to and then run like Ariza and Booker off screens, and Josh can make the right read out of that. I think that is where he's going to see some utility in this offense as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Where his career goes from here is fascinating. So, you know, I'll give a little pub for something that's coming soon while I'm on vacation, because I don't want to deal with the hate that comes with it. Doing the top 25 players, you know, under 23, 24. We'll figure out a structure soon with Cole. And one of the guys that I genuinely don't know what to do with is Josh Jackson. Like, I'm trying to figure out exactly where to slot him in. I honestly don't know.
It's just kind of too early. He's one of these guys where you just have to see more, right? Like, there's not enough of an established sample in the league. Like, there was so much negative in the beginning of the season, and then during the end, you started to see the prospect we thought we'd see. And then again, we talked about Summer League, and it wasn't that impressive, but it was more of a mindset kind of approach issue. So we'll see. I lessened on his defense. I think it's still going to be a positive. I think he's a good defender. I just don't think he's ever going to be a great defender. He's more of a playmaker off the ball than he is super disciplined. That's kind of why he complements. He fits so well next to Mikal Bridges, I think, in theory, just because they're good at the opposite things, so they kind of fill the weaknesses around each other. But I never saw Josh as a kind of perimeter wing stopper. I don't think he has the strength, length, or just general like high level athleticism. Like, not Kawhi Leonard or anything like that. So he's just gonna have to be a plus defender, and then he's gonna have to find ways to add value offensively if he's not gonna ever get a shot to a level that it's respectable. Because I mean, if he shoots 26% from three, that's just a really tough sell for a modern starting NBA wing.
Let's move on to Mikal Bridges. I do have Mikal Bridges over Marquese Chriss and Dragan Bender, but I do also think I would probably tier them in the same tier. Mikal gets a nod over them just because of the translatability of his game. I mean, what do we do with Mikal right now? Do we think he is pretty close to an immediate starter, or do we think he's just going to be more of like a backup floor spacer early?
I think he's going to be, like, ideally he'd be an immediate starter. I think he should start on this team, frankly. I think he's that good. I'm a tier ahead of guys like Chriss and Bender. His translatability on the wing, he just does things that I value for a wing at a high level. I mean, he's a shooter off motion. We saw it in Summer League, his first game against Dallas. His high release point, he's going to be able to get shots off at volume from three. They utilized him on some really awesome actions. Like, they ran an elevator set for him. They ran some like pin down, like pop out where Ayton set the initial pick and roll, and then immediately screen for Mikal's guy popping out from like above the break three. So you're going to see Igor. This is probably the guy that I trust Igor with the most, is just leveraging his ability to shoot the ball in a multitude of different ways. So I love that in conjunction with his team defense. I think the limitations are definitely there. Like the stuff he's bad at, he's definitely not good at. You know what I mean? But the stuff he's good at is valuable. That's why I think I value him a little bit more than most people.
Yeah, I think that's totally reasonable. Offensively, he's going to be awesome with Igor for many of the reasons that Igor and Quinn Snyder made Royce O'Neal like an actual NBA player. Like he can really, really shoot it off the catch. He can shoot it a little bit off movement, great in spot-up situations, not really much of a dribbler, but that's fine. Good team defender, smart team defender. He's just more skilled than Royce O'Neal, but you can see a circumstance where if they can make something out of that guy, they can definitely make a lot of hay out of Mikal Bridges in terms of becoming a legit NBA starter who can really help teams with the way that he defends and can knock down shots.
Exactly right. And I think that's going to be just prioritizing skills with him is going to be paramount. Like I really like him as a weak side defender. This is why he kind of makes a lot of sense with Josh Jackson, because I like Josh Jackson more at the point of attack where he's really getting into guys and using his athleticism. I'm not as sold on Josh off the ball. I just think he's more of a playmaker than he is discipline. And Mikal's all discipline. Like he's going to utilize his length, one of the best, if not the best closeout defender in the draft, in my opinion. So it's just going to be about putting him in positions to succeed. He doesn't have a high ceiling as far as a super high. He's not like an all-star player, but I think if you talk about guys who contribute to winning, this is one of the guys I feel best about on this roster.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Let's move on. Let's talk about Marquese Chriss and Dragan Bender. I think we have to do those two together, right? Like, because they're very tied at the hip, because they play very, very similar positions. They totally operate in different ways. But which guy do you think is the better fit for what they want to do going forward? Because they're going to have to make a call here at some point. I don't think they're going to want to sign both of these guys long term.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I think I would side with Dragan just because in Igor's system, a lot of timing sets, a lot of shooting plays, and I just like guys with higher IQ who have skill level in that setting. So I think I would just favor Dragan with his three-point shooting. And again, when he plays the five in backup lineups only, like it's not tenable long term as far as defensively. He's not that physical as a rebounder, as a rim protector, all of that. But I did feel like some of their best lineups last year, at least when I watched, like against, for example, when they were running five out and Dragan was like picking out cutters and shooters, he can do that stuff. So it just gives him, he has a little bit more value to me than Marquese Chriss does. I'm not really sure what Chriss does overall that's going to contribute to winning. Frankly, like they're both kind of 4-5 tweeners, but Chriss is not a good enough shooter to where I think that he's going to be a plus at either the 4 or the 5. And if you play him at the 5, then you have to worry about like his team defense, his rim protection, being in the right place at the right time. So it's tough with both of these guys. Clearly, they haven't measured up to what a lot of people thought they could be. I mean, I know we were a little bit lower on Chriss in the draft. I really love Bender. He has not performed to the level that I thought he would get to. But I think if you're comparing these two in Igor's system, give me the guy who has a higher IQ and a guy who's a little bit more skilled as a shooter and a passer.
I think I agree with you. Yeah, just generally, I think that's where I'm at as well. Marquese Chriss took, I thought, kind of a step back last year, which is strange to say, but like I didn't think he was great as a rookie, but I genuinely did not think he was very good last year. He averaged fewer points per minute. He averaged more rebounds per minute, which I guess matters, but like less efficiency. He was just not as useful out on the floor, and he continued to showed little growth last year, which is a significant problem for him going forward. Now, he was ahead of Dragan Bender after their rookie seasons. You can just look at how many minutes they played in their rookie seasons versus how many minutes Bender played in his rookie season. But Bender actually showed legitimate growth as a rookie. He showed genuine just actual development over the course of year 1 to year 2. He figured out the speed of the game a little bit more. He started to shoot the ball a little bit more consistently. He took 4 3-point attempts a game. Like Dragan Bender took over 300 threes last year. That is more than I would have guessed just kind of watching Suns games. He knocked down 77% from the foul line. He rebounded on a better level than I would have expected for a guy who is so skinny. Just generally, he was useful out on the floor in many ways. And you look at, their overall per minute production, you might side to Chriss, but I think that Bender probably does a little bit more in terms of, like you said, the way that he'll operate in Kokoschkov's offense. The thing is, though, they're looking for a long-term option here, and I don't know that it's either of these guys right now, to be honest.
I don't either. I think that just come out and say that full front. I'm not super confident, but I am really intrigued giving both of these guys a full season under, I don't want to say a real coach. I don't want to slight Triano. I wasn't a fan of Earl Watson, just being frank. And I think Marquese Chriss was definitely a favorite of his. So you saw a little bit of that play out with minutes distribution in the beginning of their careers. I don't think Dragan really got a fair shot out of the gate, even though he didn't do a lot with the opportunities he got. Clearly, he was a negative player.
That's what's so hard for me. I don't think the Dragan got opportunity. He didn't get the opportunity to play through his mistakes in the same way that Chriss did, but he also didn't take advantage of the opportunity he was on the floor. It's so complicated, in terms of trying to decide, can this guy actually do anything? Because, hey, look at this. Evaluating players and developing basketball players is very hard.
It's not easy. And I do think that that's important to say, is that we're not giving Dragan a pass here, for sure. He hasn't been good in the minutes he has. But I do think, again, I'm not sure if he's ever been really optimized. And I do think that Igor is going to be able to elicit the skill level that maybe we thought coming into the draft. If it doesn't work for Dragan with Igor, I would start getting really concerned. Right now, I'm on the fence. I kind of just want to see more. I want to see one more year of his progression. But if he's the same player at the end of this season, then I'm going to be really concerned.
So Dragan Bender has about a $6 million team option for next season, the 2019-20 season. What do you do with that option?
Oh, God.
Because you're not going to get to see him for that year. Before you have to make that call. You have to make that call in October, I think by the end of October. So it's not,
Correct.
This is tough.
It's really tough. And I think you have to have a plan for what you're going to do in free agency, for example. It's a tough call because I do think if we get the current iteration of Dragan Bender, he's not going to make more than $6 million, as a free agent, in my opinion, per year. If he's below that. So you kind of have to take that calculated assessment risk. But at the same time, this is not a decision that's made in a vacuum. There's politics involved here, too. Bender was the 4th overall pick. What does that look like if you decline his option, as a top 5 guy? That's tough.
Yeah, and you know what? It also leaves a poor taste in Bender's mouth, too. Say he plays reasonably well this year, and even though he's still not worth $6 million, he's still not going to want to re-sign with you because you didn't show faith in him long term, like we saw with Mario Hezonja, right? Mario Hezonja didn't re-sign for much more than what Orlando could offer him, but it seemed like he just didn't want to re-sign in Orlando because they declined his option, and they were, they decided to not show that faith in his development.
And that kind of goes to the main takeaway with Bender overall is his confidence level as a player is it kind of seems low. When he's not engaged, when he doesn't feel confident, he's not knocking down the same caliber of shots. If you mess with that psyche, you decline his option, maybe that even decreases his overall confidence as a player. Because I do think a lot of what you see with Bender is a mental battle with himself. When he is confident and, shooting the ball in rhythm, making plays off the dribble, and just playing with that ability that he's flashed at lower levels, I think that's when you're getting the best version of him. And if you take away any more of his confidence, maybe he's not the same player. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Last thing I want to note on Dragan Bender is that, this was a guy, everyone looks at him and is like, oh yeah, this guy, he's another European bust. I just want to kind of say how different he is than other European busts. We really didn't get much of a chance to scout him over the course of his immediate pre-draft year. He ended up having to sit out what is it? It's was it the U19, the U19 World Championships, maybe the U18 World Championships, the year before his draft year, because he had a bit of a conflict with his already present shoe deal. I can't remember if it was he wanted to wear Nike and had an Adidas deal or what exactly it was, but or he wanted to wear Adidas and Croatia had a Nike deal, but we weren't able to get a great look at him there. Then during the course of his pre-draft year at Maccabi Tel Aviv, he played how many minutes here? I'm scrolling down. Not many. As soon as I get this, he played 491 minutes. 406 of those minutes came in the Israeli League. Only 74 of those minutes came in Euro League. 12 of those minutes came in the Euro Cup. So those are the two higher level competitions. A guy like Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic played 80 games last year or something like that. Maybe 77 games last year. He played 70 plus games the year before that. With Bender, I don't want to say that
we took a calculated guess, but there was certainly more variance and more risk in potentially drafting him.
Yeah, I mean, the draft overall is a bunch of educated guesses. We just had less of a sample that was valuable to assess Bender with. I mean, comparing him to Luka Doncic is pretty ridiculous. I mean, that screams lazy international stigma, because Luka played at a higher level of competition and he played a ton of minutes in high-profile settings where it was pretty easy, honestly, to get valuable tape on him. Bender was a little bit more difficult, and Bender's a way different player than Luka too. So, I mean, there's a lot of different factors that go into that.
Yeah, but just in general, it was extremely difficult to kind of get eyes on him before his draft. Like he came to Basketball Without Borders in 2015 and was awesome there. That's where a lot of people really started to figure out how good he was. The 2015 U19 World Cup, 2018 or 2015 U18 Euro Championships, he didn't play in either of those tournaments. So it's, it was very complicated in terms of getting a very real sample of him, but he hasn't turned 21 until November. He's still very young. He's still developing. If you made me guess, I would still tell you he is an NBA player. But the point I want to make here is when you're drafting, you don't necessarily want to be the team that is developing these players. You want to actually make sure you get value out of their cheap years versus be in a circumstance where you're stuck developing a player and then not getting the upside out of him eventually figuring things out.
And that's what makes the draft so hard as far as rankings and stuff, because how much do you factor in first contract value? Like, Bender was always kind of subtly a second contract guy. Like, you knew it was going to take a long time for him to progress. Maybe not to this level where he was a negative player for maybe 2 years. Maybe you saw him developing at a quicker rate. But honestly, it was a really young prospect. I think the youngest in that class, or right with Ingram or whatnot. And it was always going to be a multi-year, potentially even second contract situation. So I think that is another part of this, is people writing off guys, even though the expectation, it's not like any draft video, any scouting report was like, yeah, Bender's going to walk in and be an immediate caliber starter. It was always going to be a process. But you just wish, you obviously wish you would have seen more from him in the chances he get. But yeah, I do think that is important to keep in context, is not every player is going to be a first contract immediate contributor.
Yeah, no question there. Let's move on. Let's talk about Elie Okobo, Richaun Holmes, George King, Davon Reed, Shaq Harrison.
Let's do it. I mean, let's start with Okobo here. I think it was kind of the most fascinating test case in summer league. You had some people coming out and saying, like, he looked like the best point guard in the class. You had some other variants.
Wild. It's wild.
Yeah. Based on that sample, I went back and watched Okobo. I was pretty impressed with his passing ability, especially his bounce pass ability. Like, his vision was good. He used his body really well to create separation, because he's not a high level athlete. He kind of relies on his body to like shoulder dip and then get to his spots. Good pull-up shooter. We'll kind of see if he takes more shots. He didn't take a ton of pull-up threes in summer league, but I really liked his vision.
And it's worth noting in regard to the pull-up too, that was his game in Europe. He was more of a pull-up shooter, pick and roll, like monster, who could get to the basket, who could pull up for mid-range from 16 feet and out, and could pull up from three, could shoot threes off the catch, really solid lefty stroke. Just generally, it's worth noting that like he was more of a scorer in Europe than he was a distributor. But over the last 4 or 5 months of his time with Powertez, he developed into a better distributor, and that's really why his draft stock kind of, I don't want to say exploded over the course of that time, but he definitely became a much stronger draft prospect.
Definitely, and I think that I like the pick at 31. I had him as a first round guy, so I really like the value there, and I like taking a point guard that has starter upside in the draft. I don't like taking backup point guards. I just don't value them that highly, and I think that exists with the Okobo. Down the road, it's probably going to take a little bit of an adjustment as far as adjusting to the speed of the NBA game. Not a high level athlete. I think his burst is pretty good. It's not great. He uses his body more than he does to create separation. He does just pure raw athleticism. He's not very bouncy around the rim as far as in traffic. So he's more of a craft guy to me. We'll kind of see how he develops on that end. Very curious on his defense. Have a very poor read on that as far as his overall ability. A lot of guys who watched him overseas weren't that high on his defense off the ball. But if he plays with a higher motor, I'm not really sure what to expect with him on that end. But if he plays with a good motor, he definitely has the strength. Like, he's pretty physically imposing. It's just a frame when you see him up close in person. Like, he's pretty jacked for his size at 6'3". He's got good point guard size.
Yeah, I'm generally a fan of Elie Okobo. I think I had him as a top 20 guy in the class, maybe like right at 20th or so.
Same.
I think he's legit a very good pick for Phoenix. We'll see how he develops from there. Richaun Holmes was acquired in that very strange trade how was Richaun Holmes exactly acquired? Because he got traded from. How did this happen? I forget.
So basically, it was like a swap between Phoenix and the Nets involving Jared Dudley. I can't remember. Oh, Darrell Arthur was the guy returning. So they had to clear a little bit of cap space because they couldn't just acquire Richaun because, of course, he's not a 2-year minimum guy.
It was Philly, wasn't it?
That cleared the cap space, and then they traded cash considerations for Richaun Holmes, just setting that up because they had to clear enough cap space to absorb Holmes because, again, they couldn't absorb him just into a minimum exception because he had a 4-year contract. So I think it was just cash considerations ultimately because Philly, he was out of the rotation. So that was the first trade, but that was the second trade, but the first trade that set it up was between the Nets and the Suns.
And then there was also the Muscala trade as well, like the Melo, Muscala, Dennis Schroeder deal as well.
Yes. And I think that the Suns in their deal with the Nets made like the top 5 picks in the second round protected. So that kind of gives you some value. They had to give up a little bit to clear the space. If you view these two trades in the same overall holistic trade, they had basically traded like a second round pick likely if they don't finish within the top 31 to 35 range for the opportunity to get Richaun Holmes.
Yeah. So it did end up just being a money deal to get Richaun Holmes, and I think it's a fine flyer. Just an interesting backup center, 6'10", 245. Can occasionally shoot from 3 a little bit, although didn't shoot it well this past season. Can rebound a little bit, can score efficiently at the basket, but not a defender at all. Like, that's ultimately the biggest issue. He just doesn't defend.
Yeah, the engagement on that end is not there. Kind of, I think he's an upgrade over like a Marquese Chris if you're going to play them as a backup 5 defensively, but not by a ton. I just think he's a little bit more consistent. But the overarching point here is they have a high-level athlete playing the 5 at all times, like a rim runner type who can really change ends, catch lobs. I think that they have a consistent identity there at the position where they're always going to have that guy who can really play in transition and be a dominant kind of pick and dive guy. Holmes has a ton of highlight dunks. That's what he's known for the most part. I don't really think the shooting is all that real, but at least he can change ends of the floor and give Phoenix that consistent dynamic in their lineups. Yeah,
like he's a borderline backup center, basically.
Pretty much. Yeah, I think, honestly, he might be a quality one in time. We'll kind of see how if his skill level develops at all. But, yeah, it comes down to the defense. That's what's constraining him the most as far as providing any kind of impact for winning basketball. Like guys that are this athletic, I think that Philadelphia, if they really felt good about his defense, they probably would have kept him around, even though they did sign Jonah Bolden. But I think that they're trading him for cash considerations basically kind of sums up what they view his value potentially, even though it's always kind of fraught to view decisions like that in such a vacuum. But I don't think the guy has starter upside, but I like him in a specific role.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, too, like a sneaky development in his game last year was he started to be utilized in like some handoff plays and started to pass it a little bit more in Igor's system that could blossom if he can actually show that ability like on a more consistent basis. But 12.3% assist rate in 750 minutes is not terrible.
Yeah, and I like this move by Phoenix too. I think that it does make sense both short and long term. He's going to have a really low cap hold at the minimum next offseason, and he has full qualifying rights, so they could use him as like a really nice piece. If they want to sign him long term, they can keep him on the books and they can utilize cap space in free agency and then sign him afterwards.
Yeah, or they can just let him go and it'd be like a one-year flyer for cash. Like it's fine. It's a really good deal though. Next guy I have here is George King. I am a George King stan. Very good defender, was always a very good defender at Colorado. Good 3-point shooter. He's tough. He's physical. He's 6'6" with a 6'11" wingspan. Kind of a combo 3-4. Interesting potential NBA role player, in my opinion.
And he's on a 2-way, correct?
Yes, I believe that is accurate.
Yeah, so I'm fine with that move as far as getting more of a wing type who can shoot the ball a little bit on a 2-way. I think this is kind of the archetype of player that I would invest in. I would definitely allocate those spots for wings mostly, and I didn't get to see a lot of him in college, unfortunately. He didn't really pop for me at the combine much. He did have a couple nice plays, but I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan, but at this price, like it's fine.
Yeah, no, for sure. Davon Reed. I like Davon Reed a little bit too. He was awesome at Summer League this year. I believe that they did decide to guarantee his money, right?
Yes, they did.
So that was actually, I think, smart. He's on a $1.378 million contract this year. He has a $1.6 million option for next season, or a non-guarantee, maybe it is. Didn't shoot the ball well from three in his limited opportunity in Phoenix, but that's what he can do. He can knock down shots. He's very, very long, 6'5" with a 7-foot wingspan, plays tough defensively, and is super, super smart as a human being, and very mature as a human being from what I was told during his pre-draft process.
Really like the move to guarantee his contract. Remember, they pushed his guarantee date back to after Summer League, and this was kind of like his trial. And then I think it was the first game as well, along with Mikal Bridges. Both those guys just shot the living hell out of the ball. And you kind of saw the allure with him. He's more straight 3-and-D, not a lot of playmaking for him. He's going to be able to switch. He has the length to do that. Never been totally enamored with his off-ball defense, even at lower levels, but it seems workable enough. And for that scheme, if they're going to switch a lot, you just have to have shooters. You have to have two-way players, and I think that he affords that. It was a no-brainer for me, the decision to guarantee his contract this year.
Yep, and then Shaq Harrison, I think he also might be an NBA player. Very, very good defender. He's more of like a 3-and-D point guard type guy. Like, he's 6'4", though, with relative length, and plays his ass off. Like, he might be okay being like a small point guard next to a Devin Booker. Or his point guard, I'm sorry.
Yeah, his defense really, he was one of the most impressive defenders at Summer League to me, seeing him defend up close, watching how he gets over the top of screens and engages. His physical size and his athleticism really matters in conjunction with his motor. I think he's going to be able to defend point of attack. He's the best point guard defender on this roster. Conceptually fits well next to Devin Booker, especially if Devin's going to initiate the offense. You don't want Shaq being a pure point guard. We saw the struggles that Phoenix had getting the ball to Ayton and stuff on post entries, and a lot of those minutes were aligned with Shaquille Harrison. He's not really a high level. He's not a point guard, really. He's kind of like a de facto 3-and-D, like you said. He's going to defend them and then space the floor off the ball. We'll kind of see how valuable he is as a shooter, because he's a guy that really has to shoot the ball at a high level off the catch to provide a lot of offensive value. Yeah, and the problem there is he has never shot it. He shot 19.5% from three in his last year at Tulsa, 21.6% over the course of his career at Tulsa. He only took 150 attempts over the course of 4 years. He's just never been a shooter, and that's where the concern comes in. He's definitely an NBA level defender. From what I understand, he's an NBA level teammate, good dude to have around. They have to figure out how to make him viable offensively. Yeah, I mean, if he was a good shooter, he would not be in the situation right now where his contract isn't even maybe partially guaranteed or whatnot. If he could really, because his defense looks real to me, if he could really shoot the ball, he would be kind of maybe a Patrick Beverley kind of mold. Not maybe quite that athlete, but again, conceptually, he would be valued a lot higher. There's a reason that he's got a partial right now. It's because of the shooting. And if he brings that at a level, if he even gets to maybe 32% from three or something, the lower 30s, I think he can be maybe a rotation caliber player. But I don't know how good of a bet that is. Like you noted, he's just never been a good shooter. All right, let's move on to the Sacramento Kings. I'm actually a lot more interested in the Suns than I am the Kings. I'll just kind of be frank about that. The Kings are they have a lot of young talent. I'm just very questionable on how it all fits together. Yeah, that's an understatement for me as far as questionable. I love Kings fans, so let's get that out of the way. One of my favorite fan bases in the league, but it's tough, man. It's hard for me to even empathize with this situation. Just looking at a lot of these prospects, I'm not the highest guy in Marvin Bagley or in De'Aaron Fox. I wasn't coming into the draft. I still like them a lot. It's just, are they ever going to be put in optimal roles to succeed on this roster? Yeah, I think that's true. And, having a situation where you have all of Marvin Bagley, Harry Giles, Willie Cauley-Stein, Skal, Labissiere, all four of those guys play the exact same position in that they're skinny combo 4-5s. I don't really know what to do with that, especially in a modern NBA where you probably don't want to play two of those guys on the floor together. So, I don't know. Man. What do we do here? I would start by not playing Marvin Bagley at the three. I think that is step one. Yes, step two. We will start there. Do not play Marvin Bagley at the three. God, I would love to see De'Aaron Fox playing with floor spacing bigs, so he has more room to get to the paint, because they played a lot of two big lineups last year, and you're just not going to give him the avenues to get to the rim, which is his best overall skill when you limit the floor like that. So if he went to Dallas, for example, and he could play with Dirk as a pick and pop five, that would really open up his game. It's just, I don't know if we're ever going to see that, but hopefully we do. Hopefully some of these lineups, they picked up Bielitsa, He'll play some stretch 4 for them. I think that might open up the floor a little bit. So we'll kind of see. I'm guessing you probably have Marvin Bagley number 1 on your list here.
Yes, I do. We'll talk about De'Aaron Fox in a minute here, but I do have Marvin Bagley super high. Again, I don't know that we need to relitigate the great Marvin Bagley debates of podcast past. I think that the Marvin Bagley podcast we did is one of the 5 most listened to episodes of this show ever. So we've talked about Marvin extensively at this stage in terms of what he brings in a vacuum. Let's kind of do the same thing we did with DeAndre Ayton. How do we like this fit with the Sacramento Kings?
Frankly, I don't. We saw even in summer league, he was playing most of the 4. Moving forward, you noted all the bigs they have on the roster. Who knows if Cauley-Stein's going to be on the team next year or whatnot, but at least this season, short term, I don't know how much minutes he's going to get at the 5. And that was what I liked about him, is offense there, offensive rebounding, being that play finisher type. If you mid-post him, talked about this on the Summer League podcast, he becomes predictable with his lack of a right hand. So the way he's utilized is going to be key. That was always the key with Marvin Bagley. And on this roster, it seems like he's going to be playing mostly the 4. I hope to God it's not the 3. I mean, when you start pushing him towards more perimeter play, you lose the value of Marvin Bagley. So I'm pretty skeptical on his optimal role ever occurring on at least this year's iteration of the Kings.
Yes, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I am terrified of what this eventually looks like because I love Marvin Bagley. I think he is, again, an actual elite NBA athlete. We talk about guys in the context of college basketball as elite athletes, and a lot of the time that doesn't translate. I think Marvin is an actual elite athlete. Would you agree with that?
I think so. I mean, again, when you start building in the functional element, if he's optimized, I think you get close to the maximum functional, except for defense. But that's a long story. But yes, he's an elite run and jump athlete for me.
Yes, and whenever you play the 5, you can really accentuate those skills by playing him in pick and rolls. Yes. He's so fluid and has so much body control that you can have role diversity with him. You can have him short roll. You can have him pop out. He shot 39% from 3 at Duke. That potential to shoot the ball exists. I am very, very interested in how the coaching staff here utilizes him because I don't know how they're going to utilize him. Do they ever really use him all that much in pick and roll? Is he more of a short corner dump off option for De'Aaron Fox? Is he a guy that they have trying to space from the corners? I just don't know how this is going to operate. And that's what ultimately really scares me about this. I had Marvin Bagley at number 3 on my board. I probably would still have him based off of if I was redrafting based off of the team fit that they ended up going to. I'd still probably have him 4th, I think. You can maybe make the case for someone like probably not. I think I'd still have him 4th. I was going to say a Mohamed Bamba, but he has the same kind of fit issues in terms of the roster as well. Michael Porter, we don't know about the injury history. Trae Young still is Trae Young, and I just don't think I would take him over Bagley. So, yeah, I'd still have him 4th, but it's scary. There's a lot there that scares me.
Yeah, and it's if he does play the 4, he can still be leveraged and utilized like a 5. I just don't know what the personnel combination is going to be on this roster. If you could have a floor spacing 5, is Harry Giles going to be a good enough shooter? I mean, he showed improved mechanics. We'll kind of get to that as we talk about Giles, but it's going to take someone like that, a stretch 5, to really unlock Marvin Bagley's play finishing. And that requires a very specific skill set, a very specific big. Willie Cauley-Stein's not a good enough spacer. Randolph can do it a little bit, but then it hurts you defensively if you play both him and Bagley. So not a clean big fit on this roster for him unless, again, Harry Giles really improves as a spot-up shooter and you can leverage Marvin Bagley's play finishing. Because as a prospect, if you take somebody number 2 overall and his best skills are as a finisher and being utilized in the actual action. If you just play him at the 4 and as a spacing big, and he's just spotting up from the corner, he's attacking closeouts, or you mid-post him, you're not optimizing that value in the draft. Then it becomes a lot of other players, in my opinion. I had Bagley lower as a prospect overall, but I still liked him in the right scheme.
Yeah, you had him 7th or something, right?
I think I ended up with him actually 9 or something. So I was pretty low, but in the same tier with a lot of the other guys. So it's pretty fluid. But again, a lot of it was fit dependent. And if you're just going to play him as a stretch big, a stretch 4, I just don't think you're going to get the value at number 2.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm cautiously concerned if that is like, there's like cautiously optimistic, but I feel like the opposite of that is just cautiously concerned, right? I have some real worries about how this is going to work with them. Let's move on. Let's talk about, I guess De'Aaron Fox is who we go to next.
That's who I have.
Yeah. I think he's in a tier with Bogey and Buddy, though. That's
fair. Honestly, I don't really know what to do with him quite yet.
I agree.
I think his rookie year is a little, like, people are killing him, and I don't think he was that bad. Like, it wasn't like again, this is not the best situation. They played a lot of two big lineups. He's not having optimal spacing to get to the rim. I was never the highest De'Aaron Fox guy on my board as a prospect, but I still like him a lot. It's just, can you, again, optimize him? I would love a Bagley, De'Aaron Fox pick and roll. The speed of that would be interesting, even if you duck under picks with De'Aaron, because most teams are going to do that, force him to shoot that pull-up three, where I'm not really sold on his ability to shoot there, even though I'm a little bit higher on him in the mid-range. Long-term, we'll see how that plays out. But that's the kind of system I would play him in. Put him with a Bagley-like finisher and pick and roll, where refines his reads a little bit and just surround them with shooting. I just don't know if they're going to do that.
So I think the reason that people kill him for his rookie season, like he had similar numbers to Josh Jackson. That's probably fair, right?
Yeah, and Dennis Smith, I think. They were all kind of grouped together, weren't they?
Yeah, but he didn't show any growth throughout the course of the season. I think that's what the scary thing is. Like, in October and November, he had a 45% true shooting percentage. In March and April, he had a 47% true shooting percentage. He didn't really up his scoring across the board. Like, he averaged, I want to say, like, something like 11 points a game in October and November. He's right around like 11 to 12 over the course of March and April. He just didn't show that leap that I think people hope for as a player goes through his rookie season. It's not even like he hit a wall either. He existed, and there wasn't a point where it was worth talking about him. Really, he just was there.
I think that's fair. Honestly, like, maybe he didn't have the second half progression as like a Josh Jackson, for example. I just think that people, like, this is everybody's guy they deliver kill shots towards. Like,
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I'm a pretty big De'Aaron Fox skeptic, but I did think he showed some things. Like, his minutes at the 2 last year impressed me more than at the 1 as like a secondary ball handler. Like, some of the stuff when he can attack space, he's just so damn lightning fast. We see that in transition, of course, but just he's not an established catch and shoot guy. He's a long way to go there, but I kind of like some of the actions when he wasn't just 1-5 pick and roll, because again, in that primary setting, didn't have a lot of space to operate, settled for a lot of mid-range shots. It's just very, very hard to be efficient. He was 33rd percentile, took 259 shots off the dribble, and I'm willing to bet a lot of those were in the mid-range, just because that's kind of how he plays. He takes a lot of long twos, which he's got to get out of his game. He's either got to get to the rim, or he's got to establish that pull-up three, and with his two-motion mechanics, that's always been my biggest issue with him as a prospect is, are you ever going to have to respect him out to NBA 3 off the dribble? He's got to show some pretty big improvement there, but I did like some of what I saw. Again, he played a lot of 2. They ran a lot of horn sets, so he was kind of spacing the floor and then getting into advantage situations. He's going to thrive there, but long term, why you drafted him at number 5 is to be your lead ball handler, so he's got to show some progression there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with everything stated there, basically. 16% turnover rate. I know that some people say that a high turnover rate can be a good sign for rookies because it shows that they're kind of expanding their boundaries and seeing what they can do in the NBA game. Like, statistically, it's been shown that a lot of really, really good players had high turnover rates as rookies. The problem with that for De'Aaron, in my opinion, is that I don't think he really did push beyond his boundaries as a rookie for many of the reasons that you stated, right? Like, he often played off the ball. He, was more of like an advantage scorer. He didn't take like a wild amount of jump shots. He wasn't, it's not like he was trying to do things that he's not good at and eventually just, figured out he wasn't good at them. He just didn't do them,
Yeah. And I think there's important to look at actually what kind of turnovers are occurring. It's not just like high turnover rate. You got to look at, is he trying to press the issue? Is he trying to fit balls into tighter spaces? I think that most people associate that with like progressive learning, and the willingness to actually do that, take risks, is a positive, because it's going to, over time, you're going to maybe refine your reads a little bit more. When you're not reading the defense, that's the thing that bothers me the most. And I saw a little bit of that from De'Aaron. It looked like his playmaking improved a little bit as the season went on. But early on, a lot of simplified reads, and it just seemed like he wasn't really reading and reacting to the defense. So I saw a lot in pick and roll, for example. So that's something to look for. I do like his finishing numbers weren't great at the end of the year. I think they were throughout a little bit of the season at least. They ended up in the 35th percentile. I love how aggressive he is as a finisher. Yeah. That's just something. He relies a lot on the floater. We talked about this in the past as far as it being tough to be efficient there. But he's really, that guy is fearless, jumping in bodies. Again, I think he looks a little bit bigger in Summer League this year. Honestly, he looked like he put on some weight. But that's another issue with his game. He's not ultra strong. He has a really thin lowered body. Yeah. How well can he maintain balance finishing through contact around NBA rim protectors? He has the aggressiveness, and his flash plays look great. But can he consistently get to the rim and finish in and around contact? That's going to be another aspect of his to monitor moving forward.
What did you think of his defense?
I thought, again, the narrative coming in as a prospect, just to give people context, is this guy is this lockdown defender. He got a ton of credit for being this ultra agile athlete, which he is, by the way. He can really heat up the ball. But the lack of strength, I think that is something that stood out. Yeah. He just doesn't have the frame to really switch a ton. I've never been enamored with his off-ball defense. It's just kind of funny, the narrative as prospects, looking at him and Lonzo Ball and who materializes the far better defender. How many people would have said that in college? You know what I mean?
No one.
Yeah, very few people were giving Lonzo the requisite credit, especially as a team defender, but as a point of attack where we tend to focus most of the defensive emphasis on how well do you defend one-on-one. De'Aaron's going to win that matchup in some cases because he's quicker, but he doesn't have the size or the strength really to be an ultra switch guy.
Yeah, no, the thing that was worrisome to me was that I felt like whenever he got matched up even in isolation with guys, he just kind of got blown through in a pretty substantial way. Was a 20th percentile isolation defender last year. I think he actually struggled a little bit handling pick and roll defense as well. He tries hard, he fights to get through screens, but he's just small right now. He needs to put on 20 pounds probably to be something effective as a defender in the NBA. And he tries hard, and I think that eventually he can get there. But there's still a ways to go. And he's mature, he's smart. I trust him to get the most out of what his physical tools give him. But there are worries. There are flags here right now. I would not say that I wouldn't murder him for his rookie season, but there are flags.
Absolutely. I thought there are flags as prospects. So, I'm not trying to make the best case for him overall. Right. I just think that maybe he's getting killed a little bit too much. But I agree defensively, getting run through. His best trait in college defensively was he would overwhelm other players with his athleticism. He was just way more athletic than basically any point guard he guarded. So he would always have that advantage. Now, when you're at the pros, he doesn't have that crazy advantage, and he has a deficiency as far as strength goes and versatility. So I think that's an important test case to look at. A lot of these smaller point guards, even the ultra athletes, if they don't bring strength, they're not like Chris Paul level defenders, which basically nobody is at that size. It's just hard to be a plus NBA defender as a lead guard.
Yep. Anything else on him?
I think that's it for me. You kind of noted his character and his work ethic. I think that is the biggest plus with De'Aaron, and kind of why people bought him is the character is great. He's going to work hard. We'll see how much he improves his jump shot. A lot of people likened him to Mike Conley. They have different jump shots. Conley had far more of a one motion, and he really spiked his second year as far as 3-point percentage. We'll see how good De'Aaron becomes as a shooter, because I think that's ultimately where he's going to have to win. How good does he become as an off the dribble pull up shooter? Start taking more threes, not as many long twos.
Yeah, no, I actually I think he will develop into a starting point guard, a quality starting point guard. I just don't know what the upside is beyond that.
Yeah, I think I tend to come down where that is, yes.
Let's talk about Bogdanovicm. I think he is a legitimate starter right now. He's also 26 years old, so you would expect him to be. The Kings are going to have his rights throughout basically the entirety of his prime. They have him for 2 more years after this one. They will maintain his restricted free agency rights after this one. 39% from 3 last year, 45 field goal percentage, plus true shooting percentage, 55.6%. Really sneaky, underrated passer as well, in my opinion. 3.3 assists per game. He is just... His vision is very strong, and he knows how to play basketball. That is such a key with him. He makes the smart play. He chucks up some poor shots sometimes, but mostly he makes the smart play on the basketball floor.
I think he's one of the most underrated players in the NBA overall. Like, I think he's the best player in the Kings. I think he was last year. He's really good. Like, honestly, you look at some of his distribution, you just wouldn't expect some of this. Like, 30% of his possessions, almost 31%, are in pick and roll. Like, this guy can handle, he can shoot off the dribble, he can play off the ball, he can shoot off motion. There's just a lot of, I mean, he didn't shoot great off screens last year, but he can. It's in his game. So there's a lot of ways he can contribute. Not a great high-level finisher, not someone who's going to get to the rim at a high rate necessarily. And the defense, he has the positional size, respectable level, but it's not going to be a plus. It's just he does a lot of things well, conducive to winning. Like, I think at his very worst, on even a really good team, he's a rotation player. I think he's that caliber of shooter and playmaker.
Yeah, I don't know who I would have as their best player. It's either him. I thought last year's probably either him or Buddy. Maybe that's just me loving Buddy in a way that I shouldn't. But, like, I guess that Bogey's a much more adept passer, much smarter defender, I would say, although I don't know necessarily that the tools are quite as there as they are for Buddy a lot of the time. I think that that's probably fair. He probably was their best player, but, I mean, we'll talk about Buddy in a minute. Buddy's numbers match up exceedingly well with Bogey's.
Yeah, I think that at the very least, the Kings do have two guys who can really shoot the ball. I just value what Bogdan can do a little bit more on the ball as a creator. I think they need someone like that who can get his own shot and create a little bit for others too. So it's difficult to kind of put him in context here because he is so much older than like a De'Aaron Fox and Marvin Bagley, for example. So on the hierarchy,
he's like a year and a half older than Buddy even.
Yeah, so he's older, but I mean he's already an established player. He's one of the few established actual NBA level starters that the Kings have.
Yeah, and we can talk about Buddy Hield here as well now. 13 point in his 105 games with Sacramento now. 13.9 points, 43% from three, 45.4% from the field, 85% from the line. 4 rebounds, 2 assists a game. He's actually been really good, I think. Like, he is a starting caliber shooting guard.
I mean, he was 98th percentile off the catch last year.
He's
filthy. He's basically a knockdown shooter. Like, the 207 attempts, like, he gets it done there. Like, I don't think anybody was ever really questioning his shooting. I mean, maybe the diversity a little bit as far as, off the dribble creating a lot, but he took 337 shots off the dribble last year, 60th percentile. So I definitely think he's a bench shooter. To me, he's a high-end bench shooter, and this is an archetype that a lot of guys just fail to meet. I was on a podcast with Brad Rowland, who covers the Hawks. We were talking about Tyler Dorsey, and like if he could get to this level, he's an NBA caliber rotation player. This is a level that a lot of these fringe guys can't get to. It's just being this good of an off-the-catch shooter. Even if Buddy is limited in other aspects of his game, I think he's an NBA player long-term just because he can shoot the living hell out of the ball in a diverse amount of ways. So I see him more. I don't see the upside, but I see like the very concrete floor as a rotation player. Yeah,
I mean, I will say this too. The Kings were like actually okay with him on the floor last year. 105.5 offensive rating, 109.5 defensive rating. That was a plus 7.4 net rating in comparison to when he was off the floor. So having him with the bench units that he often played with, actually I think really helped. The weird thing that I thought the Kings didn't do last year enough, and this is something that I kind of wanted to mention in the De'Aaron Fox section, but just didn't get around to. De'Aaron's most common teammates last year, there were 6 guys ahead of Buddy Hield in that regard. Like, De'Aaron only played, I think, something like a third of his minutes with Buddy Hield last year. It's very strange to me that is almost universally seen as their backcourt of the future, and the Kings just didn't really go about playing them as much as you would expect together, especially for a team that is still trying to actually like figure out its roster.
Yeah, I just don't see the Kings being good defensively kind of regardless. So I would just kind of optimize the roles for these guys. Like put him on the floor, meaning Buddy Hield, next to Bogdan, next to De'Aaron Fox, next to Marvin Bagley playing some 5, and just space the hell out of the floor. Even with Bielitsa, like you're not going to guard anybody with those lineups, but at least you're putting your guys in like developmental roles to succeed offensively and kind of getting them accustomed to playing with space. So I would very much like to see some of those lineups this year for the Kings. inexplicable if they don't, just again because you're not really getting that defensive value by playing two conventional bigs that aren't really good defenders. You know what I mean? So I would look for them to unlock hopefully more shooting lineups, and Buddy Hield's definitely a big part of that. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I mean, it's worth noting too that with De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield on the floor together, the Kings had a 101.5 offensive rating versus De'Aaron lineups versus just Buddy lineups having a 99.6 offensive rating. When Buddy was on the floor and De'Aaron was off of it, there was a 103.2 offensive rating, 104.3 defensive rating. That shows some of the concerns that De'Aaron has right now, I think, with Buddy or with defense. But there is reason to play these guys together. The team was slightly better when they played together. I just don't know why we wouldn't utilize these two more together on the basketball floor. I think that it's a mistake by Dave Joerger to not just kind of see what they have with this group and continue to play them. Agreed. And even again, I'm a little bit more skeptical on Buddy long term as far as maybe being a potential starter on a good team, but I don't know why you wouldn't at least play him next to De'Aaron and see what you have.
Yep. Yeah, I think that those four guys, the four guys we have now talked about extensively, De'Aaron, Buddy, Bogey, and Marvin Bagley, that is the backbone of which this team should create its lineups this year. You can play Bielitsa, you can play whoever you want to play, but those are the guys that you're building around. You need to see if they can actually play together now. Like you now are at the point where I know that they're young, but this rebuild, because they don't have their first round pick this year, this rebuild is around those guys. Like, this is the group you've tied yourself to for at least the next 2 years. See if they can play together.
Yep, and I think a lot of people would also factor in Harry Giles to that calculus. So is that the next guy on your list? Because I do think that there is some wide variance almost with how people view him as a prospect. He definitely impressed,
by the way.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's very intuitive to have a wide variance, but you see some people that are even pushing him maybe as potential rookie of the year. Where do you come down on Giles?
Yeah, I would not say he's going to be a potential rookie of the year. If I was the Kings, I would probably try and limit his minutes and get him just, make sure he's healthy, make sure that you stay on this track of keeping him healthy long term. I don't know that that's going to be conducive to a rookie of the year run, but also, I mean, he was good at Summer League. He wasn't crazy good at Summer League. He was fine, he showed some flashes shooting the ball. He still showed a little bit of tentativeness inside. I thought that he is, I totally understand why he would feel that way, and I understand why there would be that hesitancy after everything he's gone through. But he does need to get beyond that to reach a ceiling.
Yeah, I was impressed just because, again, my bar is a little bit lower with just being off a season due to injury and stuff. Everybody's pulling for the kid. He's a great kid. I hope the best. I think that it's kind of like a honeymoon period almost. Anything he shows is going to be positive just because we're looking for reasons to really like him, right? So long term, I'm not really sure what he is exactly. I never thought he was. I didn't watch him a ton in high school, obviously, when he was this alleged nuclear athlete, if you want to call him that. I never really. Obviously, he wasn't the same player at Duke as far as that goes. Still don't think he's that as far as on the NBA level. Never really been hyper impressed with his crazy explosiveness, but he does move pretty good on the perimeter defensively. He was in the right positions. I thought his pick and roll defense a lot of the times he was in the wrong positions, but that's way too critical. I mean, right now it's just getting on the floor, getting this guy back to playing actual real basketball that matters. It's going to be crucial. So his jump shot was the most impressive part of his game to me. It just looked like I think he's been working with Drew Hanlon or whatnot. It really looked like it. As far as I don't remember his jumper looking that clean. He actually shot the ball pretty well off the catch in Summer League, 7 of 18 total. Small sample, of course, but I think the tape is illustrative of maybe he has some shooting upside. And that just changes his realm of outcomes substantially because I'm not sure if he's ever going to be this dynamic pick and roll dive guy getting to the rim and finishing explosively in traffic. I think now you want to see more of a spacing big who can also switch a little bit defensively. That's the kind of player he's going to need to be to have value.
Yeah, no question. I think that's really all I have. I just want to see him play basketball. That's what I'm interested in. I don't know that we should have these grand takeaways on his game. When I watched him when he was a junior in high school, sophomore in high school, he was unbelievable, and I was so excited to see him. Yeah. Let's just let's see where it goes.
Absolutely. I think that being cautiously optimistic might be the stance that best encapsulates what I feel about him. I just want to see him stay healthy and actually play basketball. It's just great to have him back.
What do we think of Willie Cauley-Stein going forward?
Yeah, I mean, he's a tough one, man. I think with the right team, I don't think this is the right team for him. I just don't think they run enough spread pick and roll. They don't have the infrastructure to really optimize him. We haven't seen them even exhibit enough switching defensively to really capitalize on his mobility in space. So I see him as kind of like a sneaky low buy as a second contract guy. I'm not super intrigued by him just because I don't think it's there mentally as far as mental consistency, and that was kind of always the issue with him. Like, he's a freak athlete, really benefited from like that 94 feet defense. I think it was against Notre Dame or something in the tournament or whatnot. You just saw the agility. He moves like very, very few bigs in the league do. But just how much does it translate if he's not a high-level defender as far as instincts, as far as consistency mentally? Right now, I see him more as like a spread pick and roll dive finisher. I've always kind of felt like that. So on a team like the Mavericks, I think he makes sense as a free agent next year. But short term, like I don't know what he really brings that's like super valuable if he's not going to defend.
Yeah, like I'm still relatively interested. He is 25 now. Like, he's a little bit older than what you think he is, just given the lack of polish to his game. I'm at least interested in seeing where he could go on a second contract, but I just don't think that it's a great fit there. Like, I will say this, he's made leaps as a defensive rebounder every year that he's been in Sacramento. His passing this year was actually like underrated. Like, he actually developed some ball skills that I think, again, like in a system like Dallas, where you could play him as like a short roll playmaker, you could play him as a dive threat running toward the basket where you're actually going to have floor spacing. He is pretty interesting, actually. Like, I'm pretty much there with that being true. I just don't know that it's here. I don't know that it's in Sacramento that he's going to be able to get the most out of it, just because it's such a crowded front court. And it kind of... The problem with all of this is that he's such a complicated player to build around unless he makes an even like bigger leap as a defensive rebounder, because he's a 5 that you want to be able to play switching defenses with, but you also have to be able to just end possessions. You have to be able to get rebounds. Like, you have to play him with a very specific kind of 4 who can space the floor and rebound at an elite level. And maybe he makes another leap as a defensive rebounder and continues along this trajectory that he has. He's gone from 16.6 to 20.4 to 22% over each of his last 3 seasons as a defensive rebounder. That's a great sign. He still needs to get up into that like 25, 26, 27% role. Otherwise, he's more of like a backup to me.
Oh, for sure. And I think that the odds are that he is probably a long-term backup just because we haven't seen enough development in his game. It's a very interesting test case as far as what he's been able to show, because I do feel like he plays outside of himself a lot on the Kings, but you kind of want him to showcase a little bit more passing and maybe improve in that regard. But I do think that he makes some really head-scratching plays offensively. Just he's a guy that doesn't play a specific role. He kind of pushes the envelope a little bit too much for my liking. Some of these highlight kind of dribble attempts he did. I mean, we saw this in Summer League in the past as far as like trying to be utilized like Karl Towns. He's not that caliber of talent, clearly. So I would like to see maybe his role scaled back a little bit to where he's more, again, you give him a couple things to do on the court at one time. So he's a straight lob catcher, maybe a short roll guy who makes a pass to the corner and then switches defensively. With the Kings, I kind of like to see him play. I'm not sure who they're going to start at the 5. I mean, but that's a different conversation entirely. But I'd like to see him play minutes with Bjelica and like that 4-5 pairing and just surround him with shooting and let him roll to the rim. I think that is the kind of context you want him in. Simplify it. Less is more. Yeah,
so with Willie Cauley-Stein, too, like the big thing is that he's never been a great rim protector for Sacramento either. Like, you look at his numbers, he only contested 3.4 shots at the basket per game last year. That's not a great rate. Something like, I want to say in the 70s out of 90 players who played at least 40 games last year at the basket. Defensive field goal percentage at the basket, 60.6%, like slightly above average. He's like right in the middle range though. I think the average is like right around like 59.5 to 60%. So he's fine in terms of that, but he needs to add marginal value. Like he doesn't add marginal value anywhere right now. They don't really play a crazy switching scheme, so he's not adding marginal value there. He's a run-of-the-mill, I guess it's fair to say, rim protector. He is a guy who finished at a 53.8, I think, true shooting percentage last year. So he's not adding marginal value as a scorer. It's just it's always the little things with him, right? Like over the course of his career, it's always been the little things that he just doesn't bring to the table. And that is what has always been the issue. The glue holding his game together isn't there. If he can focus in on doing the little things, like understanding how to read offensive movement and letting his length and physical tools play up as a rim protector, and taking that next small leap as a defensive rebounder from 22.5% to 25%. If he can do that, and move to a, and continue to add some strength on his core, because right now I think he gets powered through a little bit too often at the basket.
Yeah.
Then I think there's still a potential starting center there. My guess is, though, it just doesn't happen in Sacramento. Like, I would bet on him to have a more successful career than Harry Giles, but I just don't know if, I think that for Sacramento, I just have him lower than Harry Giles.
Yeah, I think that's key, is the team context. I would have liked to see him develop, again, more fixating on the small things that you noted, just the small intricacies defensively. He's never been the highest IQ player. I think that's something that has to be noted, too. It's not like he's a super disciplined defender. He just has a ton of physical talent as far as movement ability, lacks a little bit of girth, ideally. But how you want to utilize him, I think, is like a Clint Capella type. That's what he should be able to do at his maximum peak value if he ever gets there, which I'd bet against. But that kind of player where you really simplify his role and you get the most out of the value areas. I'm not sure if he's ever going to have that level of discipline, though, and it's probably going to take a coach that consistently works with him on that stuff to get that. But again, he's already older, 25. I would bet against him being a high-level defender. I think this is kind of another thing we look at in the draft as far as guys with crazy physical talent that just maybe don't have it all the way there mentally, and the NBA is a game on the margins. You just, like, a little bit here and a little bit there makes the ultimate difference, and I just don't see that extra intelligence and Willie Cauley-Stein's game that would really unlock his ability to be a high-level defensive player.
Let's move on. Skal is probably next, right?
Yeah, I think maybe Justin Jackson. I think we got to do him, right? I think he would probably be ahead of Skal, correct?
I'd probably have Skal ahead of Justin Jackson, but we can talk about Justin Jackson if you would prefer.
Yeah, I'm not really – these guys are all pretty fluid from here on out. I'm a little bit biased positively towards Justin Jackson. I didn't really like him as a prospect, but I like him more than Skal. A guy who should get minutes at the 3 this year. Of course, his frame is the most limiting aspect to his game,
and the shooting as well.
And the shooting, yeah. But I think he showed a little bit of progression as a shooter. Like, I'm not really highly worried about his shooting prowess. Like we saw even in summer league, he looks fluid enough. Not to say he's going to be a high level shooter or anything, but I've always been more worried about his defense. Right, because his lack of frame, he can't really switch that much. He's not a high-level athlete. So what you're hoping with him is he knocks down a 3 in the catch-and-shoot situation, ideally off movement, because then you can really leverage. His best ability, honestly, is his floaters as far as pin-down curls. He's got really good touch on the move. So if you can unlock that, I think you have something as maybe a rotation player. But I'm very, very skeptical on the defense and a lot of other aspects of his game. Yeah,
I am skeptical on a lot right now with him. He didn't have a month. He had 1 month where he shot over 33% from 3, so it wasn't even a circumstance where he had a shitty month that tanked his 3-point percentage. He just wasn't a good 3-point shooter last year. He is has never been a great defender. I think that's fair to say. He has, like you said, the ability to come around screens and knock down floaters and do some stuff that is marginally valuable in the NBA, but not crazy valuable. For me, it comes down to he needs to be a 38% 3-point shooter and a at least average defender. And I don't know if I'm there.
I'm definitely not there. But I think I'm more optimistic on him than anybody else left on this list as far as maybe getting there. He did show developments in Summer League, took 56 jump shots in the half court, made 23 of them, 74th percentile. He doesn't get to the rim very often. That's something he's never going to be that guy who can finish through contact. He's going to rely on those floaters, so you kind of have to live with that. I do feel like if he can shoot the ball off motion, though, he does have a spot in a rotation, but the limiting factors and the margin for error on a guy like this is just really small, man. You have to, again, get that high-level shooting. I'm not sure. I mean, he's never really displayed that. He showed progression, I think, his junior year of college. People kind of factor that into the draft calculus. I wouldn't have taken him where they did. I'm not a huge fan, but at least I can see an avenue to him providing some value as a rotation player.
So let's move to Skal, maybe, I guess?
Yeah, let's do that.
So Skal, I don't want to say... I think he was basically exactly what he was as a rookie as a sophomore, which he shot a lower percentage from the field, which is not great, but he still ended up doing many of the things that scared us as a prospect when it came to Skal, but also kind of enticed us as a prospect because he blocked more shots last year. He rebounded on a lower level last year, which is the scary part, but he continued to knock down the occasional shot. Like he's such a tough prospect to evaluate. It's so hard.
Yeah, I mean, the shooting, when you watch him shoot, especially in the mid-range, like he has these over-the-top jump shots. He can get to his shot basically at will, just elevating over the top. That's kind of intriguing. If he can expand that to NBA 3, which he's had some success with. I mean, 59 total 3 attempts in the NBA now at about 36%. So there's some promising indicators. That's always been the tantalizing thing about Skal is like he can space the floor. In theory, he's this unicorn type who can, play the 5, not really anchor your defense, but just a guy who can protect the rim, block shots, and shoot threes. It's just, is it more theoretical rather than reality? Is he going to be good enough at either of those two things? You mentioned the rebounding, not really the most physical player, putting it delicately. He's more of a finesse big, but he's a good athlete. We'll see how it materializes over time. I just don't know if it's ever going to be more than like a theoretical sense as far as value. Yeah,
the weird thing about him right now is too, so I can kind of talk about having seen him last week. I was down at UCLA and was down at the Rico Hines runs at their practice gym, and got to see the guys like Kevin Durant and got to see Devin Booker and Buddy Hield and players like that. I also got to see Skal. Skal looks much bigger than I've ever seen him before. He has a beard now as well and has like longer hair, which like I didn't totally recognize him the first time I saw him out on the floor. He has a very unique game just in the way that he kind of hangs in the air, and I thought it was him when I saw him. And I was like, no, that guy's way too big. He looks way too thick. And then I looked at him and I was like, no shit, that's Skal. It looks like it might be okay weight, but he definitely looks a lot bigger, which is interesting in a lot of ways for his game. Like if he is put on size and can continue to block shots and contest the basket and do things, I'm intrigued. I'm interested. We'll see. Like that's where I'm at. Like I'm basically at we'll see. But I was intrigued by the fact that he looked much bigger when I saw him.
Yeah, you sent me the video and I did a double take. I didn't recognize him at all. So that was kind of interesting to see a completely different looking person. I guess putting this in context and with the Kings overall, I just don't know where's the opportunity coming for him consistently. Like there's so many front court guys on this team. Is he even going to have an opportunity to really carve out a role this year? I think like he did improve as a passer too. That's another thing. I mean, he's not like a high level passer, but some of the reads he was making just eclipsed anything I saw at Kentucky or his rookie year. So that's just another skill to monitor going forward. But is he going to have a consistent role in this team? That's a question, at least this year, because there's just so many 5s.
Yep. No, 100%. If I was them, I'd probably maybe try and see if he has any trade. I'd see if one of these guys has trade value and move them other than Bagley. Like I would see if one of Giles, Willie, or Skal have value and see if I can get off of that deal. Or maybe like attach them to Zach Randolph so I don't have to continue to pay Zach Randolph.
Either way, I mean, you got to open up some time for your young guys. And it's just they have too many prospects at this juncture. And it's just it becomes a numbers game. Yeah, no, I agree. We'll see. We'll see with Skal. I would like him to succeed. He's like one of the nicest humans I've talked to. So he's like just a very kind person. Obviously has gone through a lot in his life, being from Haiti, having a house fall on him. Like I'm very strongly rooting for Skal. Absolutely.
Frank Mason is next for me. Frank Mason is a good backup point guard, I think, just straight up. He can shoot it off the dribble. He is tough. He is physical. He's a leader of second units. He will, I think, play in the NBA for at least 6 years. Yeah, I think that's probably fair. It's funny to talk to Kings fans or like see them on Twitter react to Frank Mason because there's a lot of variance there too. Like some people think he's legit not good at all, and then others are like, oh, he's a quality backup. So, I mean, he can shoot off the dribble. He can get to the rim a little bit. Never going to be able to finish there at a high level over NBA caliber athletes. And I've never been like totally enamored with his passing. I think he gets tunnel vision a lot, but it's that high usage kind of backup point guard who has that kind of bulldog mentality, a good pull-up shooter. I think he can do worse in that kind of game as far as a pick-and-roll guy who can just give you kind of instant offense. Yeah, that's all I got. Deontay Davis, is he on this roster to start the year? Looking over their roster, they got 16 guaranteed. I would bet that he's the casualty at this juncture just because of positional depth and the fact that he hasn't really shown anything in his NBA career that's positive. I would not be surprised if they just waived him. So per 36 minutes for Memphis last year, 13.7 points, 9.5 rebounds, 60% from the field, 1.5 blocks. Okay. 16.6 PER. Okay. Like he doesn't do anything defensively though. He's still very young. He's 21 years old. He's like a third or fourth team guy. Maybe a fourth big. Like, I just don't know if you need to keep him, though. Like, to me, if you trade one of those 3 above guys, I think he'd be really nice to have on the roster. But I don't think you need him if you don't trade one of those guys.
Yeah, I just don't see the upside with him. Yeah, he's productive. But when you watch him play, like even in Summer League, he almost never pops for me in like any positive fashion. Like he's not doing anything that like takes you like aback. He doesn't stand out in any one capacity outside of just being big. Like last year in Summer League, I felt like he was huge. He put on too much weight. Maybe this year he played more at his size or whatnot. So again, it's just not a guy who provides value in any big area that I look for. He's not a standout defender. He's not like a legitimate floor spacer, even though he showed flashes at Michigan State. Just kind of someone who had the physical talent, but just didn't really have the mental acuity to really maximize that on the floor.
Yep. I don't know. We'll see. I would bet against him becoming something real, but we'll see. Wenyen Gabriel.
Yeah. He had some intrigue. I saw him at Hoop Summit 2 years ago as like a floor spacing type, and he showed that proclivity down the stretch for Kentucky. I mean, in theory, he's a guy who can switch multiple positions. I think his athleticism isn't quite the level that you'd hope for, like in terms of ideal archetype value. But if he can shoot a 3 and switch a little bit, he has the positional size. It's kind of like I wouldn't even say small ball 5. I don't think he has maybe the girth for that, but more of like a 4-5 tweener type. But he can switch a little bit and shoot. So that gives them some value. I like him on a 2-way, though. That's another contract that I don't mind at all.
Yeah, I think that he would have been one of my priority 2-way guys coming into the draft. 6'10", can shoot it from distance, good shot blocker. Kentucky's defense with him on the floor last year was like 10 points better per 100 possessions. Part of that is the Nick Richards effect. He rarely played with Nick Richards. Another part of it is that he's just a good defender. He moves his feet well in space. He can actually kind of protect the weak side of the rim a little bit. I dig him. Like, I think he can be a legit NBA player.
And he actually makes sense in his most optimistic case as a fit next to a lot of the bigs on this roster, like playing next to Bagley at the 4, playing next to Cauley-Stein at the 4. Like if he does shoot the ball and he provides that weak side rim protection, he provides some switchability at the 4. That's long down the road as far as decision-making process. Like he's clearly not a priority for them, but I do get like the upside of a deal like this.
Yep, no question. Cole, we're finally done. We did this.
The best part was like thinking that we'd get through both before your radio hit, and we got through one team, so that's 2 form.
Yeah, sounds about right for us. And we have to do this all over again because we're going to do a project, same as the one last year I did with Dieter Kurtenbach, where we run through, we're going to rank all of the top 25 players under 20, I think it was 23 and under, something like that. I'll go back and look at exactly what the hell it was, but it was something along those lines. And we will go ahead and redo that process with Cole. Guys that are going to be big leapers. Donovan Mitchell will certainly be a big leaper. Andrew Wiggins will be a pretty big faller there, but you can look forward to that. Again, I go on vacation on Friday, so I'm going to release that while I'm on vacation for sure, because it's one of those things that gets a ton of attention on Twitter, and I don't want to look at my Twitter feed while it happens. So I am excited to do it, and I'm excited to just tell people, why do you have X over Y? Listen to the podcast. Like this is what happens.
I'm deleting my Twitter outright. So it's been a fun ride, guys. If you enjoyed the podcast, I'm not going to be around for those mentions.
Anyway, Cole, tell the people where they can find your work.
As usual, on thestepin.com, have a bunch of breakdowns on the elite prospects in 2019. So RJ, we've seen, the Duke play Canada, so we have some stuff on that coming out with Zion Williamson, Cam Reddish, Nasir Little. Going down the board a little bit, Jonte Porter, so check out the Step-In and continue to listen to this podcast. And as always, guys, thanks for listening.
Yep, I have something up on RJ Barrett on The Athletic. I have something up on Kentucky's prospects on The Athletic. Go ahead and subscribe over there. Keep me employed. I will talk to y'all soon, though. I am excited to get going ranking these prospects. So until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.